Okay, we're live. We're on air. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you to my guests for being here. So this is my first live ever. So I'm kind of nervous, but please be nice. We're trying to get this going. Hi. Let's see. Where was it? Hey, everyone. Hey, butterflies. Let's see. Butterflies here. Sandy's here. Hello. Let's see. Serena's here. Melly May's here. Thank you guys so much for joining. So, the reason for this, no free promo. We're not doing free promo. If you guys now want to talk kind of like in code, something's coming down the pipeline, something that we don't like, something that they have planned against Michael, but we're here to spread the knowledge that we have. And some great people out there have made some wonderful documentaries. And I think it's time for us to study it and spread that knowledge. So we're going to try and do a watch party with the actual documentary on the screen. It might get shut down. If it does, we'll be right back with it. Probably do like Tori and Trish does with like our time codes, but we're gonna try it to see if it works on here and we can watch it all together at the same time. So it's a a test run, so hang with us. So ladies, thank you so much for being my first guest ever.
Awesome.
Woohoo! And yeah, so are we ready? We have another guest coming, but she'll be on later.
Okay.
So okay, how do I take the comments off? Okay, hi. There we go. All right, so let's get this going. Get my screen here ready.
We're doing which one? I can't see the
Take two.
take two. Okay, just a
Yes.
second.
I think it should work.
Hopefully it will. Let me know if you guys see it.
You see it.
You see it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's hit play and let's get going.
Okay, next. Now, I'm going to try to have a video.
Oh, you can watch it on here. Where's mom?
Can you turn up the volume a little bit on the YouTube side? Here we go.
Turn it up.
When it comes to Michael, it's not, well, did he do it or did he not do it? Listening to people's reasons for why he must have done it and their commentary about the trial and the case, you could not connect those dots to, well, therefore he's guilty. Well, he's a freak. He's weird. He looks weird. He went too far with plastic surgery. He has a Ferris wheel. Therefore, he's guilty. I mean, I heard really bizarre arguments. It wasn't difficult for me to understand why people thought he did it, because it's a hard thing to relate to. It's like, why would you as a grown adult feel the need or think it's a good idea to sleep in bed with kids? Because it looks bad. It looks really bad.
Well, yeah, I'm not here, and I will never be anywhere to defend the idea, the principle of sleeping in a bed with somebody else's kids, because it's clearly a very irrational, stupid thing to do for very plentiful reasons, but it is not a criminal offence to sleep in a bed with somebody else's kid. It may be a really stupid thing to do. It may be a questionable thing to do. You can see why it would raise eyebrows and why people would be alarmed by it. But nonetheless, it is not a criminal act. And it is not the criminal act with which he was charged.
the context of Michael Jackson's life, it's not difficult for me to believe that he was so far outside the realm of reality that he wanted to see himself as a kid so bad.
Mhm.
And I think he truly was miserable at times if he wasn't around kids. And I think that his judgment was so poor that people talk about there being a double standard. Well, sometimes there's a double standard because there's two things. I mean, who can you really compare someone else to Michael Jackson? Can you compare someone else's mindset to his?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of a double standard is plainly lunacy. You know, it's like you can't hold Bert up the road to the same standards as Michael Jackson, because Bert up the road hasn't been living in an alternate reality for the last 30 years of his life. You know, Michael Jackson's concept of the world is not the same as anybody else's concept of the world. I mean, from the age of 11, he was globally famous. He was unable to relate to other kids apart from his brothers, who didn't always treat him the way he wanted them to. They were a bit older than him. In most cases, they were interested in other stuff. You know, so he really lived quite an isolated life. There's a story in his brother Jermaine's book about how Michael, as a kid, when he got all his money, he would buy a bunch of sweets. He would get an allowance from his money that he was earning at Motown. And when he got his allowance, he'd go straight down to the sweet shop and just buy tons and tons of candy and stuff. And then he'd set up a sweet shop in the street. And instead of charging, he would just give it all away. So it was a sweet shop, except you didn't have to pay for anything. It was just his way of trying to hang out with other kids, was that he would try to bribe them, just try to buy them sweets, you know, because
So sad.
he was so isolated. Yeah, totally isolated. He told stories himself of being in the studio at Motown and looking out of the window because there was a softball pitch or something opposite the studio, and crying because he wanted to go and play and he had to work. It was just a sad existence, you know. And there's other issues at play there as well, which is not just the childhood thing, but you could look at it, for instance, the way that business was foisted upon him as a child. He was working, he was signing contracts, he was getting paychecks at an age where most kids don't even get their pocket money yet. And then you see when he gets older, he sort of retreats into this fantasy world and starts farming all the business decisions out to other people, which often is catastrophic. There's also the disciplinarian side of it with Joe Jackson, whereby he was terrified and he would have to do everything his father said because he was frightened of getting beaten.
And so we, not only were we practicing, we were nervous rehearsing because he sat in the chair and he had this bell in his hand. And if you didn't do it the right way, he would tear you up, really get you.
How often would he beat you?
Too much.
Would he only use a belt?
Why do you do this to me? No, more than a belt.
What else would he use to hit you with?
Ironing cords, whatever's around. Throw you up against the wall hard as he could.
When he was beating you, did you hate him?
Yeah. Strong hate. That's why to this day I don't lay a finger on my children. I don't want them to ever feel that way about me.
And then in his adult life, you see this incredibly defiant side emerge, where the moment somebody tells him he has to do something, he doesn't want to do it. So he will sign a contract, and then the minute someone tries to force him to abide by that contract, he runs away, then he gets sued. Or the minute people start saying, stop sharing your bed with kids, he's all over the TV saying, I'm going to keep sharing my bed with kids. You know, like, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do the opposite, because I don't have to do what you tell me to do. That was kind of the way he lived his life for the last sort of 25 years.
Do you want to kind of tell us how what happened in 1993 came to be?
It was 1992, so it was a year after the Dangerous album had come out, give or take, and it was shortly before the tour. It was May 92. His car breaks down close to a business which is called Rent-A-Wreck, which is a car hire business. And so they go over to the car hire business nearby, and they say, look, Michael Jackson's car has broken down. Can you do us a massive favor? We need to hire a car right now. And the business is owned by a man called Dave Schwartz. And Dave Schwartz is married to a lady called June Chandler, who's the mother of a boy called Geordie Chandler. And Geordie Chandler is a huge Michael Jackson fan.
How
So
old is
Schwartz-
Geordie at this point?
He's about 11, I think. So Schwartz gets on the phone and says, get Geordie down here right now. Michael Jackson is sitting in my store. And they bring Geordie down, and two of them have a conversation. And Michael says, you know, thanks a million, you've done me a big favor. And he gives Geordie and the family his phone number and says, why don't you call me? You could maybe come to Neverland sometime, something to that effect. And then over a period of time, the pair develop a friendship, as Michael did with various kids over the years.
Michael and Geordie developed the friendship.
Yeah, Michael and Geordie, although Geordie always comes as a package, really, with his mother and his sister. They go to stay at Neverland, then Michael comes to stay at their house. They start traveling with him on tour. They go with him to award ceremonies, all that kind of stuff. June Chandler's ex-husband and Geordie Chandler's father is a man called Evan. He's a dentist, not a very good dentist, according to the board that monitors dentists in the area. They've criticized his work in the past. He almost got struck off. He wants to be a screenwriter, but it's not going very well for him. And at the time, he owes June Chandler about $70,000 in child support. And he's been somewhat of an absent father.
And they're not living together at this point?
No, they're not living together. She's left him, and she's now with Dave Schwartz. Evan Chandler has been somewhat of an absent father, not paying his child support, not seeing Geordie as often as he should. And all of a sudden, Geordie's best friends with Michael Jackson, and now Evan Chandler wants to be involved. And he's inviting Geordie over to his house and saying, why don't you bring Michael with you, etc. Why don't I come to Neverland with you? The friendship continues for a while. Michael's staying at Geordie's house, Geordie's staying at Michael's house, always with June and the sister in tow. And Evan Chandler, according to tape-recorded conversations, starts to feel that Michael may be putting the moves on June. He feels that Michael Jackson is trying to steal his family away from him, the family that he wanted nothing to do with until Michael Jackson was on the scene anyway. After he's inserted his way back into the boy's life to get access to Michael Jackson, he starts asking him for favors. Why don't you build a wing on the side of my house so you can come and stay with us more often? Could you get me a script writing deal, etc.?
Evan Chandler at one point decides that he's going to make accusations that Michael Jackson is molesting his son, Geordie. Okay.
Yes.
Then he starts having conversations with Dave Schwartz, who is now married to Geordie's mother, or who is referred to as the stepfather, Geordie's stepfather. Yeah. And Schwartz is very skeptical of Evan's motivation, so he starts recording the phone conversations.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So before we get into the phone conversations, I want to touch on what Michael's relationship was with Geordie that led up to Evan deciding that he was going to make these allegations and thinking in his mind that they might at least in part stick. So you had mentioned earlier that Geordie was kind of a package deal with his sister and stuff, but at one point, for quite a while, it just became Michael and Geordie, didn't it?
Well, it was. I don't think it was ever the case that Geordie was at Neverland without his family. I think he always traveled there with his family, and then Michael would travel to the family home. So he would travel to either June's house or to Evan's house. And they would often stay in a room together. And then Michael is like absolutely delighted because while he's staying there, he's doing all the washing and ironing. And he's going, I've never done washing and ironing
right.
before. You know, and he's just over the moon because he's living in a normal house, having a fairly normal existence, doing normal household chores, and he just seems to be like the happiest he's ever been in his life, which is so peculiar, really, and it just tells you what a kind of a strange life he's led. But yeah, so while they're there, he's staying in Geordie's room. Everybody seems totally comfortable with it, which I guess is speaks to the relationship that Michael had with the family. And you know, I mean, what parent, if you had any suspicion at all that something was going on, you wouldn't let that happen. You just would not let that happen as a responsible parent. So I have to assume that they were comfortable enough with him and that they knew him well enough to think that it was not a problem.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, that's to me, that's the weirdest thing, that when he would say there that him and Jordy were in the same room. And do we know for sure if it was the same bed or what was going on?
Well, I don't think we know anything for sure, to be honest. I mean, we only have, for most of this Evans side of the story, we have Jordy's deposition, but that is highly questionable for reasons we'll come to. So, no, I don't think we know anything for sure. I don't even think we could say for sure that Michael and Jordy were sharing a room, to be honest. We only know that through the testimony of people whose testimony would later be thrown into serious doubt.
So what was it that eventually spurred Evan into making these allegations that Michael was committing abuse?
Well, we get an indication from these tape-recorded conversations. These recorded conversations come after he started accusing Michael of possibly molesting his son. But then when you read the transcripts, he keeps alluding to the fact that he has no idea whether his own allegations are true or not, and he keeps giving other reasons for why he's pissed off with Michael. So at one point, Schwartz asked him, "So do you think that Michael's fucking him?" And Chandler says, "I don't know, I have no idea." And then he starts complaining that Michael Jackson has stopped telephoning him, which of course is the first thing you'd be concerned about if you thought Michael Jackson was molesting your son. Right. He says, "We were friends. I liked him. I respected him and everything else for what he is, Right. There was no reason why he had to stop calling me. He could have called me." So then he starts complaining that Michael has broken up his family. And he says, he's talking about June and how June has betrayed him by running off with Michael. And he's talking about his legal team. He says, "My instructions were to kill and destroy. I mean, by killing and destroying, I'm going to torture them, Dave, because that's what June has done to me. She's tortured me." He starts talking about it as though it's an extortion attempt. He says, "I sat in the room one day and I talked to Michael and I told him exactly what I want out of this whole relationship. Then he says, everything is going according to a certain plan that isn't just mine. I picked the nastiest son of a bitch I could find, and all he wants to do is get this out into the public as fast as he can, as big as he can, and humiliate as many people as he can."
Talking about a lawyer.
It could be a massacre, talking about his lawyer, Barry Rothman. He says, "It could be a massacre if I don't get what I want. He's nasty, he's mean, he's smart, and he's hungry for publicity." Then he says, "Michael's career will be over." And Dave Schwartz says, "And does that help Jordy?" And Chandler says, "That's irrelevant to me."
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty telling.
Yeah. So the other stuff that's going on at the same time, which is quite important, is that as soon as Michael's team gets wind that Evan Chandler is making these allegations, which comes to Michael basically through Evan trying to blackmail him, saying, "If you don't get me a scriptwriting deal, I'm going to accuse you of molesting my son." Michael has his private investigator, who's called Anthony Pellicano, go and interview Jordy, and Jordy denies all the allegations and says, "My dad just wants money." It all follows from there, really. So it starts off with Evan. See, this is a common misconception about the case, is that Jordy Chandler accused Michael Jackson of molesting him. That's really not the way it happened. Evan Chandler accused Michael Jackson of molesting his son, and Jordy denied it. And then the circumstances under which Jordy changed his mind and changed his story were highly suspicious.
And so at what point?
Hello, Tori.
I just had to take a second to just think about that, because I'm like, because I heard the tape, the call. He's like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna regret this, or I'm gonna take him down," like that thing where you could clearly tell that he was plotting something that wasn't good. But like, I must have forgot that part where he was like, "Oh, so do you think he's like?"
Yeah.
So that guy he was talking to planted that little seed in his head, and he's like, let me just say that it's literally right there.
Yeah.
That's why we tell people to research. We're not even 20 minutes into this. That's enough evidence right there to show that they were plotting against him with lies.
Oh, absolutely. And you can tell when he said he doesn't care about, is irrelevant to him if it helps Jordy or not. He didn't care about his son.
Right.
This was all a takedown Michael Jackson. And when he said like, oh, he didn't have to stop calling me, you know, we were friends. I mean, he sounds hurt. He sounds hurt. He doesn't care about his son because it didn't happen. He's care about his feelings because he was getting isolated.
Wow.
What are some of the comments in the chat?
They're pretty much agreeing. Butterfly says definitely more behind that plan. Finger up for sure. And they just couldn't believe what he said. Oh, thank you, Brenda. This is a side comment, but thank you.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it just kind of remind me of a like a Jenga. That's my other page. My bad, y'all. I was like commenting from my phone, but it kind of remind me of like the game of Jenga. And it's like they built up this tower of lies to try, you know, to take Michael down. And little by little, like one by one, it's like they're like the blocks is being pulled out. And it's like the lies are still standing right now. But eventually that foundation, like anything built on a lie is not going to stand. I say that. So once that foundation crumbles and people realize like the origin story of all these allegations and stuff was like fake from the get-go, that's just going to change a lot of people's mindsets. It was like, oh, if that was fake, then what about all these other ones?
Yeah.
I'm just going to crumble.
And I think on this one, they get into it a lot more, kind of like what happened in depth. So, but yeah, they will do anything for money. That's what this was all about. And it always had been money and lies. And people hurt because Michael Jackson didn't like them or isolated them. Should we resume?
Yeah,
Yep.
Is Jordy taken to the cops and is made to testify, or what happens to get the police involved?
Okay, so what happens is Evan accuses Michael of possibly molesting Jordy.
And who does he accuse this to? Does he call up the police and say?
He hires a lawyer and he accuses Michael, basically, and to June, and says, he originally says, if Michael doesn't get me a script writing deal, I'm going to accuse him of molesting my son. And then it all flows from there, and the authorities don't get involved until a short while later. And Jordy is denying everything, which is a real problem for Evan. So Evan starts trying to wrestle custody of Jordy away from June.
Oh, right.
So what happens is Evan negotiates that Jordan can come and stay with him for a week. And that's in July 1993. Jordy goes there for a week and never comes home. While Jordy is in Evan's custody, he continues to deny the allegations for about a month. And then Evan, who is a dentist, as I mentioned earlier, takes his son into his dental surgery for a dental procedure and administers a drug. And the drug is called sodium amytal. And it was known for many years wrongly as a truth serum. People thought that if you gave somebody sodium amytal and asked them a question, they would tell you the truth. What it actually does, it makes you highly suggestible. It's been implicated in lots of, phony UFO abduction cases and that sort of thing.
Really?
Yeah, it makes you highly suggestible, the drug. So if you put somebody under and start asking them questions about were you abducted by UFO, they, in many cases, do wake up believing they were abducted by a UFO. So it was an old version of an anesthetic. They used to use it as an anesthetic, and before they switched over to the more modern methods. And it was at the time that Evan administered this drug, it was highly unusual to use it for a dental procedure.
And what was he doing? Extracting teeth?
I don't know if we know what the procedure was, but he took Geordie into his dental surgery for a procedure. It sounds like a far-fetched story, but it's actually confirmed by Evan himself in a TV interview at the time in 1994. He says in the TV interview, "I gave Geordie the drug." This is when it's being touted as a truth serum. He says, "I gave Geordie the drug, and then he just told me everything." And it was also confirmed by the anaesthetist who was present, who was then asked to leave the room after the substance had been applied. So Geordie goes into the room denying that he's been molested, and he comes out of the room now saying that he has been molested. He gives an interview to the Department for Children and Family Services. That's in about August of 1993, and that is when the story leaks. So what Chandler does, so June Chandler then tries to get custody back of Geordie, goes to court, and so Evan takes Geordie to a child psychologist who Geordie tells the story to. Under that circumstance, the psychologist is legally obliged to inform the authorities of the allegation that's been made. So once the authorities have been informed, Evan Chandler uses the fact that an allegation has been made to the police as a reason to withhold custody from June, saying that she is responsible. It was under her watch that this all occurred. And so he maintains custody of Jordan throughout the rest of the proceedings.
All right, so now up to this point, everything has been done kind of behind closed doors. Everything that's unfolded so far, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so now the press gets wind of it. How does that happen?
What happens is the interview that Geordie gave to the Department for Children and Family Services is leaked. The fact that he's given an interview is leaked to a reporter called Don Ray, who sells the story to a local news outlet. And it all, from there, is like he described it as being like a runaway freight train. It just went into overdrive. Within about 24 hours, it was all over cable news, and it was on the front of every British newspaper. I should mention, which I forgot to mention earlier, that in August, so after he's wrestled custody from June and he has extracted Geordie's damning changed story.
You're talking about Evan, the father.
Evan, yeah. His lawyer, Barry Rothman, goes to Jackson's team and tries to negotiate with them, demands $20 million in 5 installments and says, if we get what we're asking for, these allegations will never become public. And Michael refuses to pay. So that kind of gives you an insight into Michael Jackson's position here. You know, if you were guilty and you have somebody saying, we'll cover this up if you give us $20 million, and if you've got the amount of money that Michael's got, then you would think that he would pay. And I've always thought the fact that he refused to pay was actually quite a strong argument in his favor, because
heard that he refused to pay. Key part in everything. Exactly. He refused to pay. This is like little notes that we have to take. He refused. He didn't want to pay, like they're always saying. So
Jenny was saying in an interview one time that if anybody's child was being touched, there's no amount of money that you can get me to shut up. This is way before she had her child. And this person's pretty much saying, well, if you give us the money, this will never come out. No, if you touch my son, I want you in jail and I want the money.
Yeah.
For all the therapy my son's going to need. But he was pretty much saying like, oh no, give us the money, everything goes away. No, you're going to jail.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the fact that he, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The fact that he was saying, give me 20 million or I'm going public with it, and he didn't even like flinch. He was like, I'm not paying you that 20 million, so you might as well go public. it kind of was like,
Yes.
he was standing on business.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would
Yes.
think if he did it, he would have paid that $20 million because they would have found something and got him.
And this is after the fact. So remember, they were trying to like attack him behind closed doors. He would have been, hey, no, I pay you this. It never happened. Let it go. No.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? He would have tried to cover that up way before any of this happened. Michael was like, bring it. Bring it. From the get-go. I'm sorry. I get like really passionate about
No, because it's sad. Like, we all know kind people like Michael Jackson. We might even have people in our family like this. And it's just like, it went from my car being broken down and being gracious enough to like not only thank you, but say, you know what, you can come by my house and hang out with us for a while. And clearly they took a liking to the family because now he's chilling in their house. So how we go from that to extortion? And I'm like, if I had to be honest, it was probably some level of jealousy. How dare this man got more than me? I want what he has. I want his life.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot. And we're not even halfway done.
No, this is just the beginning. One of the comments here highlights that what was it? So this one. I heard that he called Michael and apologized. He told him his dad made him do it. Not sure if that is true, but it's so sad. I think he's afraid of the fandom. But we should support him. I heard that as well. I don't know for sure if that happened. But I did hear that previously.
I think the longer he holds off telling the truth, the less grace he's gonna get. Because, you know, like, I'm sure they'll probably talk about it in here, but after the fact, like, he severed ties with his family. And at that point, he was still technically a child. So, like, you know, back then you could say, like, well, that's a kid being brainwashed by his parents to lie. But once you become an adult, it's like, okay, like, I know it wasn't right, like, it was lies, but you're still not saying nothing. Then we're like, okay.
It's more than that. Look at all the damage it caused with the friendship with Michael Jackson. I'm sorry, I'd rather have a friendship with Michael Jackson than money any day. You know, so you suffered that. This also caused a chain reaction. This was the first stain on Michael's legacy. And unfortunately, this does trace back to this. So it's just like, this is not something that it sucks. Like, it's one of those things, like, there's no forgiving the family, knowing that your lies caused so much damage to this man's legacy, knowing that that Michael Jackson was being a very loving, kind person, and this is how we pray him. And it's messed up. It's basically the father who did this, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I'm
He was
like,
the one that started it all.
I'm like, I don't want those $20 million. I'd rather just be chilling in Michael's house in Neverland and just be chilling, like, having a good time.
And I get the part that it tarnishes legacy, but this messed up Michael, the human. It messed him up emotionally so much. Mentally, emotionally, it just changed his view of the world in a sense, because even though this happened, Michael was still loving, giving, humble, but it messed him up. It messed him up bad. And because
it ended up, I feel like this led to us no longer having him. Like, it's a change. Like I said, it was a bad butterfly effect.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I'm gonna resume.
Had it not been for his refusal to pay, this would never have gone public.
And so now does the district attorney, Tom Sneddon, enter into the picture at this point, or what?
Yeah, so what happens is June, even after Geordie changes his story, June remains skeptical. She says she doesn't believe it, and she only changes her mind and turns on Michael According to her own lawyer, when the police tell her that Michael Jackson fits the profile of a pedophile, which is not true, and also they start threatening that she could be prosecuted for parental neglect because it was on her watch that it all allegedly happened. So what happens is Evan Chandler does two things simultaneously. He takes Geordie to the psychologist. The psychologist is then duty-bound legally to inform the police. And at the same time, Evan Chandler files a civil suit asking for money from Michael Jackson because Michael has refused to pay him, so he decides that he's going to get the money through a lawsuit. This all becomes public in August, and the police start investigating. They raid Neverland. Michael, at this point, is out on tour. He's on the final leg of the Dangerous tour in late 1993. So he's absent, totally removed. His lawyers are periodically putting out press statements, but for the most part, he is totally removed from the situation. He never gives interviews anyway. He's totally absent. And so the media is filling the void by going off, and they start waving checkbooks around. Anybody that used to work for Michael Jackson who thinks that they want to make a buck or two can now come forward and sell a story. Various people do.
Okay, so basically Michael isn't talking. Is there a gag order on him?
There's no gag order because there's no trial. So what happens is the prosecutor tries to collect evidence that Michael has committed a crime. So they raid Neverland. Eventually, when Michael returns from his tour, they serve a warrant on him, which is a search warrant, which allows them to view and photograph his naked body.
They served a search warrant on me, which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my penis,
I hate this part.
my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted. They were supposedly looking for any discoloration, spotting, blotches, or other evidence of a skin color disorder called vitiligo, which I have previously spoken about. The warrant also directed me to cooperate in any examination of my body by their physician to determine the condition of my skin, including whether I have vitiligo or any other skin disorder. The warrant further stated that I had no right to refuse the examination or photographs, and if I failed to cooperate with them, they would introduce that refusal at any trial as an indication of my guilt. It was the most humiliating ordeal of my life, one that no person should ever have to suffer. And even after experiencing the indignity of this search, the parties involved were still not satisfied and wanted to take even more pictures. It was a nightmare, a horrifying nightmare. But if this is what I have to endure to prove my innocence, my complete innocence, so be it.
And why did they do that?
Jordan Chandler claims that he can describe accurately Michael Jackson's genitals, but when they do the photo shoot and compare what they find with what Jordan Chandler described, it doesn't match. Geordie is Jewish. It's important to keep in mind at this point, and so is Evan, and Evan's real name is Evan Charmatz. He changed it to Chandler at a later date. So he describes Michael Jackson as being circumcised, which is perhaps natural for a child who has only ever seen circumcised penises. But when they search Michael Jackson's body, they discover that he is not circumcised, which throws doubt on his story. So what you've got at this point, you've got a kid who's changed his story, said Michael Jackson didn't molest him, then said that he did. Then when he says that he did, it's only under the influence of a drug, and he gets the description of the genitals wrong. They find nothing from the search of Michael's home. So meanwhile, there's all this evidence that it's possibly an extortion attempt. So Tom Sneddon does something which is pretty much unprecedented. Tom Sneddon is the local district attorney for the county where Michael lives, Santa Barbara. He convenes two separate grand juries in separate locations, one locally and one in Los Angeles. And he asked them both to consider the case at the same time. And unfortunately for Sneddon, both grand juries feel that the evidence is so slight that they refuse to hand down an indictment, which is significant because there's an old saying in American legal circles that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. You really don't have to have much evidence at all to get an indictment from a grand jury. So the fact that 2 grand juries failed to indict is very significant. So the legal case in that sense stalls, but the civil suit where Evan Chandler is suing Michael is continuing quite rapidly. The case enters the legal system and then it just goes through the usual processes. So the judge who's presiding over the case starts ordering depositions. So all of the witnesses who are involved in the case have to be deposed. They have to be questioned under oath so that a version of their story is on record for use in the case. So Michael's lawyers are going back to court quite regularly and are saying this is unfair. This is a breach of Michael's First Amendment right to a fair trial, because in law in America, every citizen has the right to a fair trial if they're accused of a crime. That's a criminal trial. So if you hold a civil case before you hold the criminal case, what you do is you prejudice the defendant in the criminal case, because the prosecutors can come and have a front row seat for the civil case, and then they can tailor their case to circumvent the evidence that you've presented in your defense. Just for argument's sake, if you have an alibi and you raise the alibi as a defense in the civil case, in the criminal case, they can come back and change all the dates so that your alibi is no longer valid, that sort of thing. So Michael's lawyers keep going back to court and saying it's outrageous to ask our client to give a deposition in a civil case when he's facing a possible criminal case, because although the case has faltered and the 2 grand juries have refused to indict, Tom Sneddon refuses to close the case and keeps giving public statements saying this is an ongoing investigation. So Michael's lawyers go back to court and back to court and back to court and say, please don't make our client give a deposition. It's prejudicial. And the judge keeps saying, I can't continue to postpone this case indefinitely on the off chance that sometime maybe in the future there could be a criminal prosecution. So he refuses repeatedly to delay Michael's deposition. Michael privately at this time, we know through his friends, is insisting he will not settle this case. But what happens is that on the eve,
Michael will not settle the case. You get that part was very important. What they were trying to do, they were trying to have the civil case before the criminal case, and that's just not right. Because, like they said, you present all your alibis, and they can just switch it around when it comes time to the criminal case. That part was very important. Like, I like to go back just because that's like one of the key points in everything. This is like the meat and potato as to why the settlement happened and what happened. So, like, hold on, let me just go back for like a couple minutes.
The fact that even though he was humiliated, he was willing to show his generals to prove that he was innocent. Like that's beyond humiliating. That's Michael Jackson.
Gosh. Yes.
Like, can you imagine, like, you're a superstar and they're like treating you like you're a criminal from like off the street, and he still cooperated though, and that's also a sign of innocence as well.
Exactly, because he would have been fighting that if he was guilty. He wouldn't have let them.
He would have used "I'm Michael freaking Jackson" superstar card and be like, "We're not doing that." But he was like, "I'll show it," and you could tell. Like, I haven't seen that footage in a long time. You could tell he was legitly saddened. He was shaken up. He was embarrassed. Like, but he was still willing to cooperate.
I mean, like, what guilty person would go through that?
Right.
To expose themselves like that, knowing
literally, that, like, literally,
like, make it make sense.
Didn't the whole thing about them, you know how back then they would do the civil trial, they could do that first before the criminal one? Didn't this whole like case or situation change like the law? Like, where now in America it always has to be that the criminal one comes first and then, you know, the civil one comes after.
Yes.
People don't pay attention to that.
So if you guys don't mind, I'll go back a couple minutes because that part is like very important. Let's see if that's the point.
Search of Michael's home. So meanwhile, there's all this evidence that it's possibly an extortion attempt. So Tom Snedden does something which is pretty much unprecedented. Tom Snedden is the local district attorney for the county where Michael lives, Santa Barbara. He convenes two separate grand juries in separate locations, one locally and one in Los Angeles. And he asked them both to consider the case at the same time. And unfortunately for Snedden, both grand juries feel that the evidence is so slight that they refuse to hand down an indictment, which is significant because there's an old saying in American legal circles that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. You really don't have to have much evidence at all to get an indictment from a grand jury. So the fact that two grand juries fail to indict is very significant. So the legal case in that sense stalls, but the civil suit where Evan Chandler is suing Michael is continuing quite rapidly. The case enters the legal system and then it just goes through the usual processes. So the judge who's presiding over the case starts ordering depositions. So all of the witnesses who are involved in the case have to be deposed. They have to be questioned under oath so that a version of their story is on record for use in the case. So Michael's lawyers are going back to court quite regularly and are saying this is unfair. This is a breach of Michael's First Amendment right to a fair trial because in law in America, every citizen has the right to a fair trial if they're accused of a crime. That's a criminal trial. So if you hold a civil case before you hold the criminal case, what you do is you prejudice the defendant in the criminal case because the prosecutors can come and have a front row seat for the civil case, and then they can tailor their case to circumvent the evidence that you've presented in your defense. Just for argument's sake, if you have an alibi and you raise the alibi as a defense in the civil case, in the criminal case, they can come back and change all the dates so that your alibi is no longer valid, that sort of thing. So Michael's lawyers keep going back to court and saying it's outrageous to ask our client to give a deposition in a civil case when he's facing a possible criminal case, because although the case has faltered and the two grand juries have refused to indict, Tom Snedden refuses to close the case and keeps giving public statements saying this is an ongoing investigation. So Michael's lawyers go back to court and back to court and back to court and say, please don't make our client give a deposition. It's prejudicial. And the judge keeps saying, I can't continue to postpone this case indefinitely on the off chance that sometime maybe in the future there could be a criminal prosecution. So he refuses repeatedly to delay Michael's deposition. Michael privately at this time, we know through his friends, is insisting he will not settle this case. But what happens is that on the eve of Michael being forced to give his deposition, he is left with no choice but to settle the civil case because the alternative is to prejudice the criminal case should it come about. So they fight and they fight and then they lose the fight. And the choice is give the deposition and prejudice the criminal case, or settle and preserve your right to testify and present your defense for the first time in a criminal court.
So do we understand why the settlement happened now? I mean, I'm sure you guys do, but you know.
Sorry, there's like a fire in my area. That if it gets crazy, let me know. So he had to settle because if he didn't settle, that means anything in the deposition can be used in the criminal case if it became a criminal case.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that's why we're having this, because this part right here, I was like, when I first watched this, I'm like, whoa. Now, not that I ever thought, but like the details behind it made me understand better and helped me fight, the war better. It gave me more like armor and stuff. But
yeah, it's like like he's innocent. It's just that you need to have the understanding of the evidence that proves it.
I just,
Yeah.
I just found this it's kind of weird because it became a wildfire overnight kind of thing. I'm hearing about this whole criminal case and then the civil case, and I'm like, y'all really coming after him. And not for nothing, I'm so glad that you guys are doing this, but this hurts my soul to watch this. It seriously does.
I'm sorry. It's hard. It's hard, definitely. But we're just like, there's a lot of people who don't understand the whole criminal and civil case, and they have to like get it as to why it happened, because they always bring back and attack us with, he settled because he was guilty. No, it explains right here. It was only 24 hours. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back to that detail again, because that's very key points, key moments. But it's because he had no other choice. They were trying to fight and there was no other choice. So hold on,
And weren't they trying to rush? They were trying to like rush him, like on his legal side, like they're trying to pull all the evidence and things together, all that. They were trying to prepare, and it was like they weren't giving them enough time to prepare as well. It was something I remember seeing or something about it on Square One. And so it's kind of like, well, like, you're rushing me and we don't want to show our defense. So like, we'll just settle this thing, but I'm still going to fight and prove my innocence. Y'all are not going to treat me like a criminal. I'm going to prove that I'm not.
Yeah.
Sorry. Give the deposition and prejudice the criminal.
Somebody else was going to talk?
Yeah, addressing Maria's statement about doing research, my personal view on that is no matter who it is, you should always research everything. I don't care if it's Michael Jackson, someone if any kind of allegations come up, never be, what's that saying? Like, what's that saying? When you're loyal to a fault. No, you are supposed to research. Like, this is a serious allegation. If you are not privileged to be related to Michael Jackson or a friend of Michael Jackson's, how do you know what's the truth or the not? That's the whole point of us doing this series. I do research on everything, on anything. Any celebrity that's ever had an accusation, I don't care how much I love them as an artist, I've done an investigation with everybody. So that's part of being a responsible person. Now, especially back then, this is like back in 93, some of you guys may have heard of this because you were born after the fact, but you have to make sure, like, before I give someone some love, that you know your facts. So I'm very glad Maria, that you did that, the investigation. And that's what made me do my channel even more, because what I did research on made me realize something's not making any sense. I'm going to defend him and his family. So I was just like, no, I absolutely encourage people to research. I don't care who it is, especially in the climax that we're living now in 2024, 2025, different things have happened and things that we're not going to talk about here. But the point is, do your research. We're not here to give us our opinion. We're here just to state the facts. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had to do that with, like, because even us, like, I won't say like all, but like even us over here, as Moonwalkers, we might have like habits of just hopping on like a bandwagon, believing things, not as like serious as this, but maybe things about like other fans, and like we don't know the whole story about things, and we're just hopping on like a hate train, or like even other celebrities. Like, I know there's other celebrities where things have been said about them, maybe not to where it's like legal situations like this or like a life or death situation, but like, a rumor that or a big cancellation or attempt to cancel that celebrity. And I was just like, you know what? I don't like how they did Michael. Let me sit down and let me look into it. Let me learn. And come to find out, they were done wrong like him too. It's it's more common than what people think. It just happens in different ways. And I think that we should just do a better job at, if you don't want to be educated about it, just keep on scrolling. Don't fuel the hatred or anything like that. Like,
Yeah,
educate yourself,
exactly. All right, so I did go back. Sorry, guys, but this part is very important.
No, this is I love this format because it's like we get to like make sure that we're reviewing evidence or things that need to be highlighted. So
Yeah, don't apologize for like rewinding. Hi, by the way. I mean at home.
Hi.
No, don't apologize for like pausing and going back. I think we all need to hear stuff. And I think like this is really good for us to kind of like actually dig into this further. And I think like I haven't seen this whole thing. So I think this is gonna actually really help like pick up on details I haven't seen before or noticed before. So like keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and
I
chat,
agree.
if you guys need us to pause, just be like pause so we can focus on your highlight because we want everyone to be involved. We want everyone to make sure that if there's questions or things you need us to highlight, like we want everyone to just be involved as possible.
Yes, just let us know.
Yeah, and everyone in the comments, if you guys can share this link to everybody, every outlet, every social media you have, please do that.
Yes. Yes, I'm gonna play it.
Criminal case, or settle and preserve your right to testify and present your defense for the first time in a criminal court. So, well, what was happening was that Snedden would not let this go. It's known now that he traveled to at least 3 continents to interview people who he thought might have been molested by Michael Jackson.
That was before that. I'm sorry.
So they can come back and change all the dates so that you're. Because there's an old saying in American legal circles that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. Well, what was happening was that Snedden would not let this go. It's known now that he traveled to at least 3 continents.
Wait, what part was it, guys? Was it before this or after this?
Wait, which part? Which part?
The part where they talk about the settlement. I don't think he had talked about him traveling yet, had he? Let's see.
I don't.
To interview people who he thought might have been molested by Michael Jackson, who all told him to bugger off, essentially. So molested 3 prejudice. They lose the fight, and the choice is give the deposition and prejudice the criminal case, or settle and preserve your right to testify and present your defense for the first time in a criminal court. So
okay, there it is. Hold on.
Is that on the eve?
Okay, there.
He will not his deposition. Michael privately at this time, we know through his friends, is insisting he will not settle this case. But what happens is that on the eve of Michael being forced to give his deposition, he is left with no choice but to settle the civil case because the alternative is to prejudice the criminal case should it come about. So they
that part is very important. On the eve, he had to, because if not, it would have been prejudice. That key part. That's one key that we need to take when we're fighting the trolls on social media or wherever we have to fight, as to why it had to happen. Just throwing that out there.
Fight and they fight, and then they lose the fight, and the choice is give the deposition and prejudice the criminal case, or settle and preserve your right to testify and present your defense for the first time in a criminal court. So, well, what was happening was that Snedden would not let this go. It's known now that he traveled to at least 3 continents to interview people who he thought might have been molested by Michael Jackson, who all told him to bugger off, essentially. So he was traveling around the world trying to make this case work. He sent his investigators abroad also to investigate ex-employees, that kind of thing. It all fell flat. But he was spending huge amounts of public money on trying to prop up this case against Michael Jackson. What his motivation was, some people say he was a glory hunter, some people say it was racial, some people say he was just an obsessive prosecutor anyway. His nickname locally was Mad Dog because he was known for being a ferocious prosecutor who wouldn't let things go.
So
Yeah.
basically, at this point, Sneddon wasn't letting it go, so they were worried. So what you're saying is, regardless of how, if they had fought the civil suit, regardless of the outcome, there still might be a chance that in the future, Sneddon would somehow be able to get a criminal case started.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if he did, he would have access to their defense through public record.
Right. Okay. So Michael ends up settling the case because Michael's defense does not want Sneddon to be able to work around the defense strategy if there ends up being a criminal case one day. Did Sneddon ever close that case?
I don't believe he ever closed it. No, I think it remained open at the time that the second case came around in 2003.
All right, so basically Michael decided to settle the case. They settled. What happened after that?
So what happened was the settlement was completely misrepresented by the press en masse around the world, who either failed to understand the nuances of a civil versus a criminal suit or simply chose to ignore them. So the story that was told by the press forevermore was that Michael Jackson had bought his way out of jail, had bought his way out of a trial. Some of the headlines at the time were along the lines of justice for sale. The story of why Michael Jackson settled was never properly told. This explanation of the conflict and the potential prejudice of a criminal trial. And it's important to note the settlement did not preclude the Chandlers from testifying in a criminal case. So had Sneddon brought a criminal case, it would have not stopped them from testifying at all. They still would have been able to go into court and say anything.
I think your mic's muted.
Thank you. Somebody walked in. Key point. Just because the settlement happened did not prevent them from going and taking Michael into a criminal case. Key part, please take notes. And this is another weapon to fight with. Just because it was settled did not mean a criminal case would have been brought up on Michael Jackson. It definitely could have been. The settlement was for a completely different reason. We know why it happened. We have that one. And now this other key point. So I just wanted to point that out.
Doesn't that further make the opposing party, doesn't that make them look even more like worse? The fact that they still could have taken him to the criminal trial, but they were just happy. Okay, we got our money. Never mind.
Absolutely. And they just said that it stayed open to the second case. So at any time, they could have brought a case against Michael for this.
Wait a second. That was the part I wanted to understand. Oh, and by the way, hi, Ray. I the thing is, I wanted to say, okay, so you're saying that they did this 1993 and it stayed open until 2003. That means anything could have just happened in between that?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I'll go. I'm sorry if I keep going back to certain parts.
No, because I'm trying to understand it too. Because I'm trying to follow it.
I'll go back because these parts I'm like, whoa. That's why I wanted to do this one first because they're very important.
This was the origin.
But they wanted to. The settlement. Sneddon had bought it. Either failed to understand the nuances of a civil versus a criminal suit or simply chose to ignore them. So the story that was told by the press forevermore was that Michael Jackson had bought his way out of jail, had bought his way out of a trial. Some of the headlines at the time were along the lines of justice for sale. The story of why Michael Jackson settled was never properly told. This explanation of the conflict and the potential prejudice of a criminal trial. And it's important to note the settlement did not preclude the Chandlers from testifying in a criminal case. So had Sneddon brought a criminal case, it would have not stopped them from testifying at all. They still would have been able to go into court and say anything that they wanted to. The settlement also, it's important to point out, was for negligence. Michael did not in any way accept that he was guilty when he paid that settlement. The settlement was totally mischaracterized. It did enormous damage to Michael Jackson. Although he continued to be a massively popular pop star, in terms of his reputation, it made him a laughing stock, a punchline.
What was the part? I need to start writing these time stamps where they mentioned that it stayed open.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to like have notes, maybe a notepad, and then write notes down. Just in
yes.
Settled the case. They settled. What happened after that?
So what happened was the settlement was completely misrepresented.
No, it was before that because we already listened to that part.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if he did, he would have access to their defense through public record.
Right. Okay. So Michael ends up settling the case because Michael's defense does not want Sneddon to be able to work around the defense strategy if there ends up being a criminal case one day. Did Sneddon ever close that case?
I don't believe he ever closed it. No.
32-21. So the case was never closed.
So this has been open for about 10 years. Was this on purpose, or was that like a messy?
Because he was still trying to search down the line. He was still trying to build a case against Michael. So it didn't stop him there. He was still trying to reach, Michael after 93, he was still investigated by the FBI throughout that whole time. So he was still trying to find, I guess, boys that come against Michael, and he can always bring that back as long as he had that case open.
Oh, I see. It's like an obsession. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I think it remained open at the time.
How
the second case came around in 2000.
Sorry.
Wait, what?
Oh, I thought somebody said something.
Desperate he was to find stuff. Like, it never closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
A criminal case one day. Did Sneddon ever close that case?
I don't believe he ever closed it. No, I think it remained open at the time that the second case came around in 2003.
All right, so basically Michael decided to settle the case. They settled. What happened after that?
So what happened was the settlement was completely misrepresented by the press en masse around the world, who either failed to understand the nuances of a civil versus a criminal suit, or simply chose to ignore them. So the story that was told by the press forevermore was that Michael Jackson had bought his way out of jail, had bought his way out of a trial. Some of the headlines at the time were along the lines of justice for sale. The story of why Michael Jackson settled was never properly told. This explanation of the conflict and the potential prejudice of a criminal trial. And it's important to note the settlement did not preclude the Chandlers from testifying in a criminal case. So had Sneddon brought a criminal case, it would have not stopped them from testifying at all. They still would have been able to go into court and say anything that they wanted to. The settlement also is...
Another key point, 33.29. They could have always brought up a case against Michael. So the settlement did not stop them from bringing a criminal case against Michael.
Important to point out was for negligence. Michael did not in any way accept that he was guilty when he paid that settlement. So the settlement was totally mischaracterized. It did enormous damage to Michael Jackson. Although he continued to be a massively popular pop star, in terms of his reputation, it made him a laughing stock, a punchline. He was mocked, he was questioned. It opened the doors for anybody who wanted to try to sue him, or wanted to try to get money from him or take advantage of him. They had an easy stick to beat him with. So you see there's a deposition tape which is available online, which was recorded in about 1996 over a completely separate issue. And in the middle of the case, in the middle of the deposition, they start asking him all these questions about whether he's ever molested any children, of no relevance whatsoever to the case, but you can see It just really horrifies and infuriates Michael Jackson. He almost throws his hat across the room. It ruined his life, in a sense. And what you see with Michael Jackson is a massive downward spiral. You see an incredible artistic renaissance. So you get the History album. The History album is an incredible piece of work, easily his most personal work, his least commercial work of his adult solo career. It's an incredibly expressive, interesting, lyrically, jam-packed with... it's probably, I've described it before as the most anti-establishment album you'll ever hear by a mainstream pop star.
The History album is really, I remember getting that album, and some of the stuff on, some of the music was so dark that it was kind of surprising. Like, I couldn't listen to Little Susie, if that does not sound at all like a Michael Jackson song, like what you would think of, when you listen to Too Bad, and then the video for that, again, written by, the story written by Stephen King, kind of a sequel to Thriller. When you listen to Too Bad, every time I hear that song, I just think of him in the studio, just growling those lyrics, just thinking of the DA the entire time. Just like all the passion in his voice as he's belting that out.
You will never, ever hear an album by a major pop star. It's anti-police, it's anti-military, it's anti-banker, it's anti-corporate, it's anti-lawyer, anti-insurance. He's ripping the shit out of everyone. There's a song on there called Tabloid Junkie. And if you take some of the lyrics to that song and you just look at them on a piece of paper, you'd think it's a Public Enemy record. He's talking about institutional racism. I think the second verse is something like, in the hood, frame him if you could. Shoot to kill, then blame him if you will. But if he dies, then sympathize. Such false witnesses, damn self-righteousness. If he's black, stab him in the back, or in the face, then lie to shame the race. The whole album is like that. It's just furious. It's the song Money, where he's talking about the military or the police, and he's talking, if now you're wearing the badge, you're called the just few, you're saluting the flag, the country trusts you. And then he goes on to talk about, but actually, they'll do anything corrupt to get their hands on money.
I hope they don't cut me out for this.
Oh, you might want to mute it.
Yeah.
Let's talk over it.
Okay.
I was like,
it's a great song, though.
The whole album is massively anti-establishment.
And that was kind of Michael's response, I guess, to 93, because he had a gag order slapped on him, didn't he? He couldn't talk about the...
With the settlement precluded him from discussing the case. And what happened, this is another window into the confusing mind of Evan Chandler, is that Michael releases the History album. Evan Chandler decides that this is a breach of the gagging order, which was part of the settlement. And so he goes to court and requests permission from a judge to release his own album called Evan's Story, where he will respond to the History album, which again, is this the kind of behavior you would expect from a father, recuperating from the molestation of his son?
That's the thing, is the further and further we get into 1993 and 2003, the person who ends up looking the most sane and rational is Michael Jackson. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, that is the crazy. And some of the things he did are totally irrational. For instance, after 93, to keep letting kids in his house, batshit crazy, totally crazy. But, in terms of what's going on around him, like you've got the father of this kid he's claiming his kid's been molested, and his priority is to go to court and say he wants to release an album. It's just insane.
And what happened to Jordy?
He gained legal emancipation from his parents and didn't speak to them for a decade.
Did you read about the abuse allegations that Jordy leveled against his father? I guess he had...
Yeah, they got back in touch after about 10 years, and he then accused his father of trying to beat him to death with a dumbbell weight, I believe. And then a few years later, Evan died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And that was a self-inflicted wound about, what, a week after This Is It came out?
Yeah, it was not long after Michael Jackson died. It was within months of Michael Jackson's death.
Mm-hmm.
So read into that however you will. But anyway, in the years in between, Michael keeps himself busy by releasing the History album, which is his way of talking about it without actually violating the gag order. There's a few notable things that happen, such as marrying Lisa Marie Presley and Debbie Rowe and having children of his own. Is there anything important that we should talk about before we get to 2003 and the next round of allegations?
I think the important thing to keep in mind is the context in which 2003 happens, which is that from the late 90s, the very late 90s, into the early noughties, Michael slips back into drug addiction.
The pressure resulting from these false allegations, coupled with incredible energy necessary for me to perform, caused so much distress that it left me physically and emotionally exhausted. I became increasingly more dependent on the painkillers to get me through the days of my tour. My friends and doctors advised me to seek professional guidance immediately in order to eliminate what has become an addiction.
So he becomes addicted to painkillers during the Geordie Chandler allegations in 93 and 4, goes to rehab and gets clean. Then in 1999, he performs a concert for charity. He's on top of a bridge performing Earth Song. And what's supposed to happen is the bridge splits into 3 parts, and the part that he's standing on slowly lowers itself back down to the stage level, and he climbs off. What happens is that goes wrong, and the part of the bridge that he's standing on plummets down below the stage floor, and he damages several vertebrae in his back. He is put on painkillers, understandably, and as far as we can tell, never gets back off of them again until the trial.
I wonder how much that injury in 1999 affected his performing, because that was the last time I really saw him dance where it looked like it was just magic.
Yeah, that's the last time he looked like he was performing effortlessly and at a standard which was comparable to his best. Come 2001, he does these 2 30th anniversary shows. The first one, he shows up with Elizabeth Taylor 3 or 4 hours late. Elizabeth Taylor is an old lady at this point, walking up the red carpet with a man in his early 40s. He is clinging to her for support. His flies are undone on his trousers. His face is sort of hanging open. His mouth is hanging open. His eyes are glassy and wide. And he gives interviews on the red carpet, and he's slurring visibly, and he looks medicated. He goes on stage, barely manages the concert.
And these were 2 concerts, right?
Yeah, the second show was a marked improvement, but still nothing comparable to Michael at his best. And this is just a general feature of Michael Jackson's career for the next 2 years leading up to the second round of allegations, is that his judgment is seriously impaired by his addiction to painkillers.
Were you under the influence of drugs or alcohol that impaired your ability to understand what you were doing?
It could have been medication, yes.
Okay, what medications were you taking in about January of 2003?
Could have easily have been pain medication because I had some serious injuries on tour.
On what tour?
I had a serious fall. It was I'm not sure it was a tour. It was a show that we did, a benefit show. And I had an accident also at home. So I'm sure it's something to do with that.
He is not behaving rationally. He's making extremely poor business decisions. He's making extremely poor personal decisions. And one of those decisions is to participate in the Martin Bashir documentary, Living with Michael Jackson. So Michael signs all these documents with Bashir, totally bad judgment. And Michael has a brainwave, and he thinks, the thing that's damaged me the most in the last 10 years is people's opinion about my relationship with children. So wouldn't it be a great idea if I invited this boy who I've helped cure his cancer, called Gavin Arvizo. Why don't I invite him and his family up to the ranch? And then Martin Bashir can film me and Gavin talking about his story, and people will understand what a lovely person I am. So this turns out to be perhaps the worst decision of Michael Jackson's life, apart from getting involved with the Arvizos anyway, because of what they turn out to be. So it's probably a good idea to just tell the story of Gavin Arvizo and how he comes into Michael's life, which is in the late 90s. He's about 8 years old, and he's diagnosed with cancer. And his family start fundraising for his cancer treatment, and they start getting him in touch with celebrities in a sort of a make-a-wish type sense. And he starts hanging around with people like George Lopez and Chris Tucker and eventually Michael Jackson. Michael invites them out to the ranch, he buys them a car, he takes them on holidays, etc., looks after them. And eventually Gavin is cured. And then when Martin Bashir comes to Neverland to film his documentary, Michael thinks what a great idea it would be to invite Gavin up here and his family so that they can tell the story of how I helped them when he was dying and how now he's okay, and people will understand my relationship with children and what it's all about. Unfortunately for Michael, he makes a poor judgment on the day he holds Gavin's hand during the interview, and then in the interview talks about how Gavin has stayed in his bedroom, albeit points out that he gave his bed to Gavin. Gavin asked, "Can I sleep in your bedroom?" Michael said, "Only if your mum says it's okay." Then once they're there, they have an argument about who's going to sleep in the bed and who's going to sleep on the floor. Michael says to Gavin, "If you love me, you will sleep in the bed." Gavin sleeps in the bed with his brother. Michael puts a sleeping bag on the floor.
He said, "You can have my bed if you want. Sleep in it. I'll sleep on the floor. It's yours. Always give the best to the company, you know?" Like to him, I said, because he was going to sleep on the floor. I said, "No, you sleep in the bed. I'll sleep on the floor."
But haven't you got a spare room or a spare house here where he could have stayed?
Yeah, but no, yes, we have guest units, but whenever kids come here, they always want to stay with me. They never want to stay in the guest, and I have never invited them in my room. They always just want to stay. They say, "Can I stay with you tonight?" I go, "If it's okay with your parents, yes, you can." Michael Jackson's bedroom is a 2-story duplex as well. It's important to understand. This is not like a 10 by 8 box room. This is it's like bigger than most people's houses. So the documentary airs and quite understandably attracts a lot of criticism, albeit Michael's saying nothing that he hasn't already said publicly. In the 95 Diane Sawyer interview, he said, "I will continue to sleep in a room with children." He goes on TV with Bashir and says, "I still sleep in a room with children," and it causes a furore. The headlines are misleading. "If you love me, you'll sleep in my bed." They omit the fact that Jackson slept on the floor, etc. This creates a new buzz around Tom Sneddon. People start going to Tom Sneddon and saying, "Are you going to investigate?" Somebody makes a report to the Department of Children and Family Services. It might have been Gloria Allred. The Department for Children and Family Services interview the family, and they interview Michael Jackson and conclude that there's nothing going on. Nothing is awry. But a few months later, a few months after it aired, about 6 months after it aired, maybe a little more, suddenly news breaks that Neverland has been raided by Tom Sneddon and 70 sheriffs.
Once again, Michael isn't there when it happens.
Michael is not there. Michael is in Las Vegas filming a music video for the One More Chance single. He was trying to extract himself from his contract with Sony, who he believed had attempted to defraud him out of his publishing catalog. So he believed at the time that he owed them one single, and he was in Las Vegas shooting the video, literally in the middle of shooting the video for the single that would free him from his deal with Sony, when word reaches him that Neverland has been raided in his absence.
And so his reaction, we now know, was what?
I spoke to Dieter Wiesner, the manager at the time. Dieter tells in the interview how initially Michael was just horrified and sort of stoic and crying. And then when it emerges that the accusers are the Arvizo family, he becomes enraged and he says, we're fighting this. And he says, I want this kid in public. I don't want him to look me in the eye and tell me that I did this. Ultimately, that is what happened in 2005, because Tom Sneddon, on this occasion, successfully arrests and charges Michael Jackson, and it proceeds to a trial just over a year later.
There's so much that blew up here. Where do we go from this point? I mean, first of all, I remember when the allegations broke, the first thing I thought at the time, there's no way he did this. There's no way, especially when I saw the timeline, I thought, okay, so Michael Jackson goes on an international documentary in front of tens of millions, and he takes all this heat for holding hands with this kid and for talking about how this kid sleeps in his bed and blah, 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 blah. And then Michael decides that after this airs and Gloria Allred has gone and tried to get Children's Services to investigate him, then he decides to start committing sexual assault. I found that really hard to believe.
Yeah, the timeline was totally nonsensical, but the accusers and the prosecutor were backed into a corner. They were stuck in a situation where the family had known Michael Jackson for about 3 years, maybe 4 years before they made this allegation. But unfortunately for them, they had appeared in a Martin Bashir documentary where they'd spoken about what a lovely person Michael Jackson was and how he was a father figure and he'd saved their son from cancer. So it was not really feasible for them to then go on the record and say, yeah, all this time Michael was abusing Gavin and we just decided to lie about it on TV. So the only way that an allegation could be brought was to claim that it had happened after the Martin Bashir documentary.
When everyone was on red alert, and Michael knew everyone was on
Exactly.
red alert.
I mean, the story that they go to court with is that Michael Jackson begins molesting Gavin Arvizo in the middle of the Department for Children and Family Services investigation, in which the Department for Children and Family Services are asking Gavin Arvizo whether he's ever been molested. That is the timeline that they go to court with. And the timeline was compromised further because it turned out that in the weeks immediately after the documentary aired, Michael had commissioned by a rival TV station, a documentary called Take Two, The Footage You Were Never Meant to See. And it's a counterattack on Martin Bashir, where...
Hosted by Maury Povich.
Hosted by Maury Povich for some reason. And Michael had been secretly recording his interviews with Martin Bashir, which is devastating for Bashir.
Which Bashir didn't know. Oops.
Because Bashir didn't know. And he's captured all this footage of stuff that Bashir has cut out of his documentary, and he's lied and he's omitted stuff. For instance, Bashir had asked Michael Jackson's team to invite a bunch of children up to the ranch. And they said, yeah, how many do you want? He said, oh, maybe 24. And they go, oh, okay. So then they arrange for some kids to come up to the ranch. And then Bashir films it and puts a voiceover over the top going, I was disturbed that Michael Jackson continued to invite children to his ranch, and all this stuff.
At his own suggestion.
Yeah. And he'd spoken to Michael on the tape saying, your relationship with children makes me want to weep because it's so innocent, pure. He had antagonized Michael Jackson by, just before they were going to do an interview, saying to him, Elizabeth Taylor's going to die soon, don't you? And there was all this stuff that was cut out. It was just outrageous. But the reason I was talking about Take Two is because for the Take Two documentary, Michael has recorded by his team a video interview with the Arvizo family, which is about an hour long in total. Edited down shorter, and then it was never included in the show.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember ever seeing that.
No, they decided not to use it. But what happens is the prosecution finds out that it exists, and now they're in big trouble because they've created their case. And it turns out that this throws the timeline out even more. So what they do, they charge Michael Jackson with about 10 counts or 9 counts of providing alcohol to a minor and abusing a child. And then a series of incidents happen which they show the prosecution in very poor light. Firstly, they exceed the terms of their own search warrant. They go into Michael Jackson's home and they access areas of his house that are not covered by the warrant, and they remove property. They go into his office, they remove his business papers, which seems to be a purely malicious act to try to screw him over until the trial occurs. Then they raid the office of the private eye who has been hired by his defense team. So it's routine in a major trial for defense to use an investigator. They do things like tracking down and interviewing witnesses, taking witnesses to and from court, etc. Routine behavior. The fact that he hired, because some of the anti-Jackson press were saying, and he even hired a private investigator. That's totally normal. That happens all the time. The prosecution illegally raid the office of Michael Jackson's defense private eye, which is a breach of attorney-client privilege. They're not allowed to do that. They later go into court and say we did it by accident, and then the judge bizarrely rules, okay, well, if it was
How do you
an
do that by
accident, you can
accident?
keep all the material that you seized, which is just absurd. And then they
Exactly.
also go into the home of Michael Jackson's personal assistant, Evie Tavassi, and they remove from her home a folder which is marked for Mesereau being Michael Jackson's attorney, which again is a breach of attorney-client privilege. At some point in the process, they become aware of two things. Firstly, Michael Jackson has an alibi for the charges as they exist on the indictment. Then Michael Jackson's then lawyer, attorney, Mark Geragos, goes on TV and reveals Michael Jackson's alibi live on TV, which was a stupid thing to do. And additionally, the prosecution finds out that there exists this videotape of the whole family being interviewed extensively on video for the Take Two documentary, albeit it wasn't aired, where they're singing Michael Jackson's praises and saying he never did anything wrong, he's like a father figure, he saved Gavin's life, etc. But the prosecution finds out about it, possibly through these illegal seizures of documents that they shouldn't be seizing. And so they add a new charge to the indictment. The new charge is of conspiracy, and they accuse Michael Jackson of kidnapping the family and forcing them to deny the acts of molestation to explain away the videotape. But then, because the alibi is no longer, because they find out that the alibi exists and so the charges can no longer have occurred between those dates, they changed the dates on the other charges that were already on the indictment. So now their case is completely thrown out of kilter, where they have Michael Jackson abducting a family and holding them against their will so that he can force them to deny on videotape a series of acts of molestation which he's not yet committed. So the whole case makes no sense whatsoever. And so it comes to trial in early 2005.
How did it get to trial? That's what I don't understand. With how bogus this is, how did it even get that? How did it get past a grand jury?
It's unbelievable that it came to trial, in my opinion. I suppose the problem that you have is before that grand jury enters the grand jury room, they've been exposed for 10 years to stories about Michael Jackson buying his way out of a trial. And is it reasonable to think that a grand jury is not going to take that into account? They're not allowed to take it into account, but they're going to anyway.
We go to trial and the prosecution starts. So the prosecution begins their case, and how does it go for them when the prosecution starts calling their witnesses? What's the prosecution's game plan?
Oh, wow. So their first witness is Martin Bashir. So what happens is Bashir comes and takes the stand and refuses to answer any questions at all, citing the journalist's shield statute, which means that journalists cannot be forced to testify about who their sources are or to reveal unpublished journalistic material. But he raises this statute in response to every question he's asked, no matter how basic, and even if it would not involve disclosing a source or disclosing unpublished journalistic material.
Why did the judge let that fly?
Well, what happened was Mesereau repeatedly asked for Bashir to be held in contempt of court, and the judge said he would stay his decision. He said, your request is noted and I will make a decision at a later point. But what Mesereau did was he took advantage of the situation. So you've got Bashir sitting there refusing to answer anything. And so Mesro just stands up and tells the whole story through questions. Stands up and says, is it not true that you told Michael Jackson you were going to introduce him to Kofi Annan and help him to organize a World Children's Day? Is it not true that you told him that the documentary was about his work with AIDS sufferers and about his charity work? Is it not true that you promised to interview his friends and then you failed to do it? Is it not true that you asked for the children to be brought to the ranch, etc., etc.? And then he starts introducing documents and he says, Mr. Bashir, Michael Jackson's signature on this document is different than it is on this document, isn't it? Bashir refuses to answer. Did you forge a signature on this document? He just told the whole story about Bashir and what a rat he was and how the whole thing had been a con job. And Bashir refused to answer any questions. So really, the decision to bring Bashir as the first witness, which Sneddon thought it was a genius because it allowed them to play the videotape of the Living with Michael Jackson documentary, which he was sure was going to immediately prejudice the jurors against Michael Jackson. But what it actually did was it gave Mesereau an opportunity to completely destroy their first witness, so their case got off to a terrible start. And then it got even worse when the second witness was called, and that was Anne Gabriel. And she was a PR lady who'd been brought in to help firefight after the Martin Bashir documentary aired. And she ended up turning into a defense witness and testifying that Michael Jackson had no idea what anybody in his team was doing, but that they were all acting unilaterally, and just really threw a massive spanner in the works for prosecution because she totally undermined their conspiracy charge.
I guess that when we talk about people who, if it occurred, the sex abuse, the only people that would have firsthand knowledge of it would have been Gavin, his brother claimed to, not the mother, but let's talk about the mother. But let's talk about those three. Those three were the only family that testified in court. So Stars.
Can we see some of your questions? I guess I need to clarify a few things. Melanie May had some clarifications. Timestamp 9:51.
9:51. Thank you. 9:51.
Actually, it's even.
I don't see a question 9:51.
Not a question. Go to 9:48. So I think it starts about clarification. Basically, it's addressing that there was manipulation coming from Bashir. To have him hold Gavin's hands. You know, that's messed up. If the person who did the documentary knew he was having the arrangements of the 2,000 kids come up or have him hold Gavin's hand, he could have clarified that in his footage, or he should have never edited that video the way that he did it, because it did look sus the way he edited it.
You talking about the rat?
Yeah. Oh, we don't say his name.
Oh, but
no,
that guy's a rat.
I know we have Snake. We have Snakey. So I didn't know we had a new one here for a rat.
Yes.
Okay, for the rat.
Michael called him that.
Well, you know, Martin Bashir, his intention was already to do what he was trying to do. And that was a method of yellow journalism. Oh, sorry, I'm a little sick right now. So, yeah, that was all intentional, all of that, you know.
I didn't know this at all.
Really?
No. I did not know that the rat manipulated the situation to this level.
Oh,
it was bad.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this was even in the 2000s. I remember they were talking about this. Like, what he was doing was like very snake-like, you know, everything was weird.
He did it with Lady D as well.
And that's why he's in trouble now.
Yeah. Yep.
It was like they were saying there was things like that were cut out. Like Michael's cameras was always going. And it'll be things like, "Oh, you're such a good dad," da 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 da. But then Bashir would cut that part out in his documentary. Sorry, the rat would cut that part out in his documentary, and it would be like stuff like, "Oh, well, didn't you let this happen to Prince? Didn't Prince get scratched in the
Oh yeah.
mob?" Like, just trying to make him look like a bad dad and stuff. And it's like, wasn't you just singing my fatherly praises? Like, why are you singing a different tune now? But it's okay because I got the footage. And so it's out there. But one thing I forgot, and we probably can't do, we probably could do it in parts, but there's a whole audio playlist. It's 100-something videos of
the
transcripts.
Yes.
That's good. If you want the raw, unfiltered truth from like the courtroom perspective, just play those clean, listen. It's crazy.
Wait, hold on. You're saying there's transcripts of the 2003 trial?
Yes.
Oh my
It's
god.
it's on YouTube.
Interesting.
It was stuff in there like they were trying to, like, I think I didn't get too far in it, but I got into like the opening arguments and stuff where like the lawyers are like, "Oh, the evidence is gonna show that da 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 da," and it was just wacky stuff on the prosecution side, what they were trying to accuse Michael of. I'm like, can y'all be so for real right now? Be so for real. But I think I got into like that part and then maybe like one of the first witnesses or something.
What I didn't know was how the initial documentary got created and how Michael was trying to show his good works with helping this kid get through cancer and stuff. Because I'm going to be honest, I thought it was, so me and my mama was like, we knew something bad was going to come out once we saw that documentary. Now, the good thing is we didn't think Michael did it, but we were just trying to figure out why would Michael Jackson let someone shoot him in the house with this really weird, situation. I was just like, it did seem off, but I didn't know what the backstory was. I didn't realize how the kid got invited, why the kid was there. I was like, that is so messed up how manipulative this is. I always felt like, because, I actually went to school for documentaries. And they've always taught us you can make something look really good or really bad. That's the power of the editor. So I always felt like, oh, okay, they manipulated it. It's like, but I never realized to what level. This is horrible.
Yeah.
This is so horrible.
Yeah, it's incredible and it's insane the way he painted it. But the thing is that if any person's in the media, if they paint a certain story, it always comes back because you see the injustice, how you see the justice is blindfold, the statue lady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's because perception, however it comes out, people can believe whatever is being told to them, but no matter what, truth will come out regardless. There's nothing that can be done to hide that.
Exactly. I would say, like, if anything, and nobody's perfect, nobody's a saint. I'm sure, like, Michael probably like cussed somebody out before. I don't know, but I had to ever since like I was younger, I knew when something like Trish was saying, when something just wasn't right, like Michael wouldn't just let this happen. Like, this is weird. Like, I knew like it wasn't his doing, like it was somebody else's doing, twisting certain things, like even down to, let me talk in code here, there was something that he wanted to do creatively, but it ended up getting twisted, and the outcome, like I remember like looking at it, I'm like, this is weird, like something's off about this, like this isn't him. And then I finally found the backstory. Come to find out, it wasn't his final call. It was, we'll say, the business's call. And so, like, that's another thing. Like, if something don't look right, if something's like twisted, Like, try and look into it and be like, investigate a little bit.
I agree.
Michael's problem was he was too nice, but you could tell he peeped that Martin was being shady throughout everything. Yeah.
Yeah, like the part where he's wearing burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, oh my god, that's my favorite part because Michael's being shady.
He got the lights on him and everything.
Yes.
When he was looking at the finger tape.
Yeah, I was like,
yes, I thought I was, it's funny. I thought I was the only one because I know throughout the whole documentary, he's like, la 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 la. Then comes this burgundy daddy.
yes, yes.
Michael was good with the shade. When Michael did shade, it was funny.
Yes,
yeah, like Brenda said, those side eyes. Yes.
I think what it was is that people, because he was so, he had that childlike part of him, and he just seemed so nice. People kind of, and I feel like people think now they kind of like, they treat him like he was dumb. Mm-hmm. Like he lacked.
Yes.
Like they didn't think he would catch on and stuff. And I even think now some people
find that so funny. Like, I'm very childlike, and I always tell people, I said, there's two sides to everything. Don't mess with us. Like, don't mess with us. Because it's true, like, everyone, I always tell you guys, if you ever see my child side, that means I feel safe around you. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, Rocky knows me more than anybody. Yeah. She knows I'm a witch. I could be a witch someday. Like, there's no other way to say that. Like, everyone has two sides. But I think because Michael Jackson was a celebrity and he was nice, I just think he don't have the luxury to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I love about, like, the second gen. They will pop off. Oh, yeah. They're not going to let people disrespect them like that.
We got to remember, he's also a Virgo. I mean, he's analytical. He's a fast thinker. He got that camera popped up. I was like, I didn't know that he had a camera in there. I was like, wow.
Lord.
I think maybe he just didn't feel comfortable, like, being up front and putting people in their place when they were being disrespectful to him.
That I will say, it probably took him a lot to, like, confront certain people, because they said, like, even when people would do him dirty and do him wrong, like people who were like employed by him, he did not want to fire them, because he's like, well, I heard like they need money, like they're having it hard, like I just don't want to do that to them, even though they were doing him like very dirty, like scamming
his money and stuff. Yeah.
A lot of that. I think he was just kind of like he knew they were always gonna twist it against him, and he just like didn't want to deal with that. It's like, well, he didn't want to stand up in a sense, because it will always be, well, Michael is like mean, he treats people evil and stuff like that. So it's like they don't want to deal with the heat, because it would always come back against him.
Gina had a good question about the biopic.
So quickly on this one, why did they? Because they want to, but no, they didn't find any, like, how do I say that? I don't know if like I can say that.
They call it CP. They try to say it was that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They try to say that they found that there, but it wasn't.
No, there was none. No, and they brought that up, I think, in the trial, that there was nothing like that. If they did, he would have been in prison.
From that alone.
From that alone, exactly. There was nothing.
You know what's weird about that part? Because I remember hearing about this art book stuff. I'm an artist as well, and I used to have all these books of forms. You know how, like, for sketching and illustrations, you're gonna see a lot of nudes and stuff like that of figures for the study for art. And also, if that was the case, did they show these photos in the court? Like, were they presented or anything like that? See? It's
No.
just holes.
Pardon?
Yes.
I don't know if they'll talk about this. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead. I'm just highlighting this one.
Oh, it just kind of reminded me of the books thingy or whatever they're trying to say. But like, even there was certain like magazines or something that they had, and then they had Gavin hold it,
Mm-hmm.
like when he was like supposed to be like a witness or whatever. Like they gave it to him, so then like it's like they planted his fingerprints on there, and they were trying to say like something along the lines of, "Oh, Michael let him look at these adult magazines" or something like that.
So he was handed the magazine without gloves, so that would automatically put his fingerprints on it. They were trying to be sneaky,
Right?
but that got thrown out because Tom Messer caught onto that.
See,
Trish, is this the question you had asked about?
Yeah, I wonder how the biopic will handle the allegations. I know that new fans will be formed after. I'm hoping it will be. So this is the question that so allegedly, because we addressed this a few weeks ago, allegedly the biopic has to be reshot because they cannot talk about the allegations from 1993. So if we don't know how long the biopic is going to go. Is it going to go 2001, 2005? To his death, we don't know. So I don't know if they're going to have to maybe address the 2005 ones. I think that could be addressed, but allegedly the 93 ones cannot be spoken about. And remember, we still haven't heard from Lionsgate, Jafar, anybody that can tell us what's going on with the biopic. All we know is delayed for a few months and there's possible reshoots. We just haven't got no confirmations about reshoots yet, though.
Exactly.
That's a good question.
There's no confirmation yet.
But John Branca did say it was supposed to be addressed. The question is, which one now?
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll tell. I think they'll talk on all the allegations, but if, like you said, allegedly, if they aren't like, if they have to reshoot, I think they might just like not mention any names, and just say like, oh, he's been alleged to, or there's an accusation. Hopefully they still, bring it straight. But if that's the case, they might just like not use no names and just kind of maybe use a fake name, because in the New Edition story, Ralph Tresvant, his first girlfriend was in there, but they used her name as Xena and not her real name because she didn't want no part of you know how it is with exes, so she didn't want no part in that. So hopefully they just make up a name.
I think they can do that. I think they'll be clever to do that because I've seen the movie Oppenheimer, and because Oppenheimer was the father of the atomic bomb, they didn't want to showcase the Japan, Nagasaki, and Hiroshima bombing because they know that movie was going to go overseas to Japan. So instead of showing the action of it, they had a part to where it was suggested, and then they just moved on from it. So they could possibly do something similar to that.
Yeah.
And he had to play it smart with like the history album, because he wanted to talk about what he was through. So even the song DS, we know who that's about, but he slightly like changed the name.
Mm-hmm.
So they could go the different name route, or they may not give a name. I wonder if they can get away with that. Just say, oh, the kid or something like that.
Yeah, I could see where they would just like imply that it happened, but they don't actually give a name in particular.
I love Brenda's point, but Tori won't let us have a watch party for the movie. I don't remember this.
I am not holding you back from doing that. I am not holding you back.
I will go to Jennifer. Like,
oh gosh.
Which movie is it?
This one.
This is this is a lie.
Oh.
This is more like what not to do with people's makeup kind of thing. I'm
Oh
like,
my
every
goodness.
fan has to watch this. Every fan.
Oh my.
I saw a
Just for
part in
some
there.
comedy gold. That's it.
I saw a part in there
Yes.
where Joe Jackson's character was like, "Get your narrow behind." I said, "What is this?"
Yeah.
In the beginning,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, the part that made me mad was when he was supposed to be performing Man in the Mirror. I don't know, it was supposed to be like the Dangerous tour. I was like, what is this?
I remember nothing but the bad makeup. Literally. I said, I need a refresher. I need a refresher.
Well, maybe after this, everything passes, we'll have some comedy relief.
I think we need that.
Yeah.
Chat said absolutely not.
Oh, that was a good little laugh, a good little break to break the
No, we
tension.
need it. Like
Yeah.
I remember like the beginning of watching this. I'm not gonna lie, I felt very teary eyed and very
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of us thought this was behind us, especially after the 2019 mockumentary. And I'm like, when is this over?
Mm-hmm.
When someone has so much evidence clearing them. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and it's just not fair.
Right.
I like the way the guy, I don't know who it is, but the one who's kind of conducting like this, like the narrator or the conducting like the interview, like asking a question. I like what he said, like when we found out what happened to Evan Chandler, like after Michael's passing, and he was like, do with that information what you will. But
Yes.
like more than likely a lot of people are gonna assume it's probably like the
guilt.
I would say that's what I was thinking, like the guilt eating him up. And so I think it comes with like that, like maybe he just didn't think like, oh, I'm just doing this to be greedy. And so like he didn't think it was probably gonna like affect anybody to the point where it led to them losing their lives. And that's the part that got me. I'm like, while they was just sitting up here eating up his money and all that and trying to like, take him, like take advantage of him and stuff, like they weren't thinking that it could lead to no longer having him. And that's what kind of just like, I had to take a moment that.
Yeah. I don't think people think of the consequences of them doing things like this. Like how many celebrities get these really messed up lawsuits and these stupid things happening to them, not realizing it takes a toll on them mentally, number one, and financially. So it's just like people are very greedy and selfish. This is beyond greedy and selfish. Because you had access to the most famous man on the planet, and you just couldn't leave it alone. Like, hey, my family's cool with Michael Jackson. We get to hang out and do really cool things. No, he said, you know what? I want 20 mil. What? Based on what? And you wasn't even present in your family life until your son got, and the mom had access to Michael Jackson. So, wow. You were there, but you weren't as present until you realized the access your son had.
Yeah. Just some people in life are just slimy, and some people are just not civil and very psychopathic. It's weird.
It's messed up though, because I don't think people think of the consequences. Like Soy said, such a butterfly effect. This was the seed that led to the downfall of Michael Jackson. Not only mental health, but eventually his life.
Could you imagine?
Eventually his life.
Yeah, could you imagine if that car never broke down? The world we would
exactly.
My God. He now he would be on social media saying, "Hey guys, come on my live."
Aww.
Please.
Could you imagine? I'd have been like, Mike, Big Mike, because Little Mike is Prince. I'm like, Big Mike, come on out.
Please.
Just the thought of that, like being able to say, because you can tell by Prince that Michael was a really cool person.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like just the thought of that, like It was happiness and sadness at the same. I was like, that I could see Big Mike, sorry, being with us.
Michael would definitely have like came to the station heads. He would have definitely popped up on live. He was that type of person.
Yes. And you could tell by his family, like almost all the family on Station Head has been kind enough to say, "Hey, we appreciate you."
Except for one family member.
It's coming! It's coming! It's coming!
Lord.
Y'all don't want to know what I would do if I saw him. Sorry.
We got
the
like
thing we did when we met Prince. Remember, me and Jess were the funniest of Prince.
Oh, you gotta see me that video.
I do.
No, I
So-
know we have to finish.
we got like 48 minutes. Y'all good?
We're good. Go
To
ahead.
continue. Okay. All right. So I'm glad we took like a little breather, a little break, because we definitely needed
Right, because
that.
I think we needed it, right? Because it was getting heavy.
Yeah. All right. So sadly, we have to continue. I'll go back a little.
Gavin Arvizo's younger brother, there was no that would have firsthand knowledge of it. Would have been Gavin, his brother claimed to, not the mother, but let's talk about the mother. But let's talk about those three. Those three were the only family that testified in court. So Star is Gavin Arvizo's younger brother. There was no accusation that Star had been molested.
No, so Star's story was that he had witnessed Gavin being molested on 2 occasions, although he suddenly decided it was 3 on the stand, which didn't do him any favors. But he comes in, he tells a wildly different story than the story that he told originally. When he was first interviewed, he said the first act of molestation that he'd witnessed was Michael Jackson laying in the bed next to his brother, and they were both laying on their side, and Michael Jackson was rubbing his penis against his brother's buttocks. That was what he told the investigators originally. By the time he came to court, he said that they were laying side by side on their backs and that Michael Jackson had his hand in his brother's shorts. So totally different story. Then he comes to court and tells 2 different versions of the same story about the second act of molestation. He claims on the first day that his brother had his trousers on, and then claims on the second day that he didn't. Now, all of this story is predicated on Star being able to enter the room without Michael Jackson catching him.
Wasn't there an alarm?
There was an alarm on the door. So Michael Jackson obviously lives in a very busy house. There are chefs, there are cleaners, etc. up and down the house all the time. And he's fiercely protective of his privacy. He's also very frightened of his children being abducted. For what reason, I don't know. I think his ex-wife, Debbie Rose, said that they had received specific threats.
Hence the masks.
Yeah, that's why the children wore masks. And all of the bedrooms in the house had locks on. So in order to enter Michael Jackson's bedroom, he had to bypass an alarm, which would sound like on a sensor. So if somebody walked past it, almost like a doorbell going off, would ring in Michael Jackson's bedroom. So Star claims that on 2 occasions he walks into Michael Jackson's bedroom and sees his brother being molested. But this hinges on Star being able to walk into the bedroom without the alarm going off. Now, Star, to put it politely, is not a skinny child. Star is quite a big, quite big for his age. And the idea that he would be able to sneak past this alarm was not feasible. And the defense brought into evidence videos of people trying to walk past the alarm without setting it off, and it couldn't happen. So the story didn't make any sense. His testimony was quite bizarre.
Well, I think the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, as we're about to find out.
Well, he told all these weirdly specific stories. I mean, it was like he'd been rehearsed. He kept saying things like, and then I walked 23 steps into Michael Jackson's bed. It was all like really weirdly, specific stuff. You know what was great was Mesro ruined him on cross-examination because he said, how do you know how many steps there were? And he said, I have this thing where whenever I climb up steps, I count them. And then Mesereau starts asking him questions about all these other steps he's climbed up. And of course, he can't remember how many of them there are on any of them. So it just was like ridiculous. And then there was a whole section about where they claimed that while they were kept hostage at Neverland, they weren't allowed to look at clocks. They weren't allowed to know what time it was or what day it was. And then Mesereau's going, well, isn't there a clock at the train station? Isn't there a clock outside the house? If you stand on one hill and look in this direction, isn't there a clock? There were clocks everywhere at Neverland. I mean, it was like Disney World.
There's a clock as big as Rhode Island outside of the main house.
Yeah, you know, it's just crazy. His testimony was terrible, and then there was this whole issue with the wine cellar where.
Okay, two things. Before we get into the wine, what do you make of people like Diane Dimond, Nancy Grace claiming that the only reason Michael Jackson had an alarm outside his bedroom was to alert him to stop sexually abusing kids when people would walk up?
I mean, you know, how could they possibly claim to know that? And it's just a silly thing to say. You know, if you live in a house which is very busy with workmen, gardeners, cleaners, chefs, etc., walking around all the time, it's reasonable that you would want a bit of warning before people come into your room. The other thing that you have to remember is that Michael Jackson, as we saw him, was not Michael Jackson as he looked. Michael Jackson had a skin condition called vitiligo, which left his whole body, including his face, covered in blotches.
Right.
And he also suffered a terrible burn in a Pepsi commercial, which left him partially bald and scarred on his head. And he had to wear hair pieces for the rest of his life. And by that point in his life also, his hair had receded and the front of his head had been tattooed black and he wore a permanent wig.
To say nothing of the other surgery he got that didn't go so well. I mean, it took some work, I think, to get him to look.
Exactly. And he would not have wanted people walking in on him looking as he did without all his makeup and hair and stuff. The lengths the media went to were quite ridiculous. The way they were trying to reframe everything, you know, so he can't just have a playroom in his house. It has to be a secret playroom. And it can't just have dolls in it, which children play with. It's creepy dolls, creepy, dead-eyed, you know, whatever, or models of children. Not a doll, it's a model of a child, you know. So it's the way they take everything and try to, I mean, Tom Sneddon even took art books, like legitimate art books, which you can go into a shop today and buy. And because they had like cherubs in and things, he was claiming that this was indicative of an interest in child pornography, which is just lunacy. Thomas Mesereau wrote in a document that was submitted to the court, he said, not since the dark days of almost a century ago has a prosecutor tried to claim that ownership of work by a known artist is evidence of a crime against the state.
We were about to get into what was known at the time as Jesus juice in the wine cellar.
Jesus juice, yeah.
Yeah, could you talk about that?
So Michael Jackson was accused on this occasion of getting the boy drunk so that he could be molested by giving him wine. And the accusation was that he had been giving him wine from a wine cellar at Neverland, which was referred to by Michael Jackson as Jesus juice, which is a story which has remained, you know, prevalent until today. People talk about it as if it's fact. It's not.
Tori, you wanted to say something about a question?
Oh, you remember the question about the books? Them so-called finding books with things in there. That addresses it. It was they said, what's his name? I'm gonna call him DS. DS found came across a book. I don't even know what it was, but it had the cherubs, like the little the visuals of like the baby angels. And of course they're gonna be baby angels, like they don't have any clothes on. And he tried to say, oh, this shows that he has an interest in looking at things like that with kids and stuff, but that doesn't even make sense, because like,
yes,
I can tell you now how many people you go in your grandma's house, your auntie's house, there's going to be those little angel figurines or pictures of them.
Yeah, the ceramic ones, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we broke one before. Like,
yeah, so, they have like the statues of like the couple kissing. You guys ever had that?
Yeah.
Like the naked couples. Like people just have that statues and stuff around. Now I'm saying that Michael did, but it's a common thing to have around in your household as art.
Right.
Yes, good eye, Tori. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Fact, it's conjecture, and the wine cellar incident. So there were witnesses who came to court and said Michael Jackson didn't give them wine. They stole the key to the wine cellar, and we caught them in there without Michael Jackson present. And there were witnesses who came to court and they said we caught them in his bedroom when he wasn't there. They'd learned the code and they'd gone into his bedroom when he was off the ranch. There were people that came into court and said we caught them in his bedroom going through his drawers and his suitcases and looking at pornography, because Michael Jackson owned a lot of heterosexual pornographic magazines.
And that part is true.
Look at Trisha's face.
But that part is true.
Because no one corrected the Jesus juice thing. No one ever corrected that.
Yeah. There we go. Little nuggets. But I think it was Taj said that he also felt bad because a lot of the PORN magazines were yes. Said that he also felt bad because a lot of I heard myself talk about it. I'm listening to myself like yes. But, Taj had said that he felt bad because some of that were theirs, the 3 T's. I heard some of them.
Wait, what was theirs? What was theirs?
The PORN magazines.
Oh, okay.
But yes, there was that. I heard it in the live, so yeah.
I thought that they would sometimes go and like get it for him or something like that. Okay.
That too.
Oh my god.
Them kids was mad.
It's a guy thing.
No, not 3T, but the Marvizo kids.
Oh yes.
Oh, okay.
But that is normal kid behavior to break into the liquor. Like I know when my mom discovered we were going into the liquor, they were like, "I know you guys are kidding me." So they found out because we were watering down the liquor, not realizing, we're stupid, we're teenagers. That's kid behavior. Is it right? Of course not. But if you can get into stuff you have no business, you're going to do it. But no one's ever publicly announced that. None of them.
Yeah.
That Jesus juice thing is still a joke and it's not funny.
It is.
I used to sneak and drink my grandmother's beer. Me and my cousin were little.
Yeah, I was like, are you kidding? I don't have kids for a reason. Afraid I'm going to birth myself. So I'm very sneaky. Or was. I was like, and you would think like, oh, she plays with Barbies. I'll leave it there. Yeah, I play Barbies. Another thing. No, I was a really, really sneaky girl.
Lord. He didn't even want to. I heard that he didn't even, like, at one point, he didn't even want to be there while they were there. Like, he would still let them, but he just didn't even want to be, like, y'all a little too shady. Like,
wait a second. I heard about that. So, like,
yes.
So, so after some time, he's just like, I just don't want to be around them. Is that the truth?
I've heard that too. I don't know if they mentioned it on here, but I've heard that too.
Were they the kind of guests that overstayed their welcome, you think?
Yes. Yes.
I see. Yeah.
They were. And they destroyed a lot of things at Neverland too. I think they showed one of the Michael had a guest book and they wrote their names really big and messed it up. I don't know if it's on this documentary, but I heard that in other documentaries and stuff. So yes. Let me go back to that one part because a lot of people haven't heard about it before. The Jesus juice.
I said what?
The prosecution
said Michael Jackson didn't give them wine. It's conjecture, and the wine cellar incident. So there were witnesses who came to court and said Michael Jackson didn't give them wine. They stole the key to the wine cellar, and we caught them in there without Michael Jackson present. And there were witnesses who came to court and they said we caught them in his bedroom when he wasn't there. They'd learned the code and they'd gone into his bedroom when he was off the ranch. There were people that came into court and said we caught them in his bedroom going through his drawers and his suitcases and looking at pornography, because Michael Jackson owned a lot of heterosexual pornographic magazines.
That the prosecution tried to somehow claim meant that he therefore had an interest in young boys, which I couldn't figure out.
Yeah, that was a peculiar... Well, what they had a problem. So they raid Neverland. They find about 5 art books, or maybe 7 art books, something like that, which are legal art books that you can buy in a shop. But then they find also quite a large number of heterosexual pornographic magazines, which Michael Jackson had in a suitcase in his bedroom, or a briefcase maybe. And they're stuck with a problem here, because this is evidence that Michael Jackson's a heterosexual man, seemingly.
Which you can still sexually abuse kids and be heterosexual.
Yes, absolutely. But it was damaging. It was damaging to their case that Michael Jackson was obsessed with children and obsessed with little boys and etc. So they had to build into the case that he was showing these magazines to kids, and that was the reason that he owned them. And so there were 2 things. They introduced fingerprint evidence where they found his fingerprint and the boy's fingerprint, Gavin Arvizo's fingerprint, on the same page of one of the magazines. So firstly, witnesses came to court and said, we caught those kids in his bedroom without his permission when he was not there, going through all this stuff and looking at his magazines. And secondly, Tom Sneddon, during the grand jury proceedings,
This part.
Was accused of giving one of the magazines to the boy, or giving a number of the magazines to the boy.
To Gavin.
To Gavin, to say, was this, did Michael show you this magazine? Did Michael show you that magazine? Then putting them into evidence bags and sending them to fingerprint analysis.
Okay, so I want to repeat that real quick. So before the trial starts, just to hit this home.
Yeah.
Sneddon, the district attorney, took these magazines. He handed them to Gavin to look at. Gavin's not wearing any gloves here, okay? So what is happening? Gavin's fingerprints are now going to be found all throughout these magazines he's being handed. Then after that, Sneddon takes the magazines back and he sends them to an evidence lab where he asks them to please test the magazines and see if they can find Gavin's fingerprints on the magazines that he just had Gavin thumb through.
Exactly. That is the contention by the defense.
Why did the media not cover that?
I mean, I spoke to one witness. I'm not going to name them because I don't think they want me to, but I spoke to a witness in the case who was a prosecution witness in the trial, and they told me that the media was so involved in the trial and the prosecution case that they took that witness shopping and picked their outfit for them before they went to testify. That is what they told me. That's what this witness told me. And they told me that every prosecution witness that they knew was selling stories to the press, which was illegal because there was a gag order, and also because you're just not supposed to do that. But the way they were getting around it was that they were selling interviews, but they were invoicing it as photo shoots. So they do an interview and then they take a couple of pictures, and then all the money would be paid for a photo shoot and not for an interview. So the media was totally inserting itself into the prosecution case.
Let's get to Gavin's testimony. Yeah, can you give us a breakdown of how that went?
He came across as surly, according to various witnesses, and kept referring to the prosecutor, Tom Sneddon, as Tom, which sort of indicated an inappropriate level of closeness.
They're definitely on a first-name basis.
So the story that Gavin told never really made sense, because the story is, I was on cancer medication, which meant that I couldn't take alcohol if I wanted to.
Right.
Then Michael gave me alcohol, which would have made me very ill and possibly made me unconscious. And then, having sedated me by giving me alcohol, he molested me, which I remember for reasons unknown. So it was like, so he sedated you with alcohol, but you remember him. And the whole thing made no sense. His story contradicted that of his brother, who had supposedly witnessed it. The other thing that was significant was that to demonstrate the supposed grooming process, he had told the police and said in court that Michael Jackson told him, you have to masturbate, boys have to masturbate, because if they don't, they get pent up and then they go out and rape someone.
So boys will become rapists if they don't masturbate, was what
Yeah.
Gavin claimed that Michael said to him.
But under cross-examination by Michael's defense attorney, Tom Mesereau, he admitted that it was actually his grandmother who had told him that, not Michael Jackson, which meant that the whole grooming story was predicated on a lie. So you've got this kid comes in, he had a bad attitude, according to various people that were in the courtroom, really surly, really aggressive, messing around, and then he started complaining in the middle. So this was under cross-examination by Mesereau. This was a Mesereau masterstroke. So he took a massive risk because the kid kept saying so. Gavin Arvizo kept saying something about Michael. He was mad at Michael, and Tom Mesereau, he told me that you're taught as a lawyer in cross-examination, never ask a question that begins with why, because you open yourself up to a bombardment of negative testimony. You have to ask closed questions, yes and no questions, or questions that you already know the answer to. But he took a massive risk. He sensed the atmosphere, he sensed the boy's attitude, and something just told him that if he asked this question, he would get a response that would be really damning for the prosecution. And he broke all the rules and he said, "Why are you so mad at Michael Jackson?" And Gavin Arvizo snaps back, "Because he stopped calling me and he didn't have to do that. Why did he have to cut me out of his life?" Didn't say because he molested me. Didn't say because he sexually abused me and took advantage of me. Didn't say because I was a cancer patient and he gave me alcohol. He said because he stopped calling me.
You know who that reminds me of?
Evan.
Yeah.
I just said that in the
was
chat.
really-
Who does that remind you
Mesereau
of?
thought it was the most seismic moment of that cross-examination, that he gave the boy this golden opportunity. Why are you so mad at Michael Jackson? He could have spent the next 10 minutes saying, because he gave me wine, he jeopardized my life, he abused me, he did this, he did that. And he just shot back because he stopped calling me.
It sounds like a jaded ex-girlfriend.
That's kind of the way it came across, actually, was that the whole family just seemed to be really cheesed off because Michael had cut them out. So after the Bashir thing, the family go to Florida with Michael, the Arvizo family, and Chris Tucker comes and joins them. So what happens is they're all together, and the family is bugging Chris Tucker because they keep saying they want him to give them his car. They keep saying, you've got loads of money, you've got enough cars, you could just give us this car and it wouldn't matter. And he found it very strange. And he takes Michael aside and he says to him, "Michael, there's something wrong with this family. I'm warning you now, there is something seriously wrong with this family." And Michael just basically cuts them out. Michael had given them a car. The car broke. He said he was going to get it fixed. Then this all happens and he ends up not getting it fixed because he's been warned off, don't have anything more to do with this family. And they got furious that he wouldn't give them the car back or he wouldn't buy them a new car. Gavin Arvizo seems furious that he's not getting the phone calls from Michael Jackson that he used to. There was another incident that he talks about in his testimony that he was really angry because one time they went to Neverland and stayed there for free. And when they got there, the staff told them that Michael was not at the ranch.
I remember that.
And then they saw him in the library and they were angry that he was avoiding them. So it's there was an atmosphere around the whole case that if Michael had not cut this family off, if Michael had kept buying them things and kept acknowledging them and answering their calls and so on, then this case would never have been taken to the DA. It was almost like, okay, he's not giving us anything anymore, so we're going to take something. That was the attitude that you were getting.
And let's get to probably my favorite witness, the mother.
Yeah, the mother is, I mean, wow.
She was the one who was snapping at I think the foreman of the jury. Wasn't he a Mexican man?
Yeah, Paul Rodriguez was the foreman. He was a retired school principal.
And at some point, she starts snapping her fingers at him, and she's like, "You know how our culture is," or something like that.
Yeah, and that angered a lot of the jurors. A lot of the jurors really did not take to this lady, and some of it was to do with the evidence that was brought forward by the defense.
So she takes the stand, and what happens?
So during the prosecution case, so with a prosecution witness, they come on the stand, the prosecutors have direct examination, they question the witness, then the defense cross-examines. So the prosecution bring the mother on for direct examination, and they can't control her. So every question they ask her, she goes off on some crazy tangent, ranting and raving. The Germans were conspiring against us, blah, blah, blah.
The Germans.
Yeah, she kept talking about the Germans. The Germans were trying to ruin us and all this stuff.
I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, Thomas Mesereau, Michael's defense attorney, decided not to ever object during her testimony.
Exactly. He said there were members of the defense team who were looking at him like, why are you not objecting to this woman's testimony? Because she's just going off on all these tangents. She's going beyond the scope of the questioning. He was like, this is fantastic, because she is revealing with every runaway tangent that she goes on, she is betraying her true colors.
Yeah.
She's telling us who she really is. She's a crazy person who just rants and raves about the craziest stuff. She claimed at one point that she believed that she was going to be kidnapped in a hot air balloon. So then, after this crazy direct examination, which just goes on and on, because Mesereau decides not to object, and the prosecutor, Tom Snedden, one of the team of he's leading the team of prosecutors, he is seen with his head in his hands as this lady is testifying, because it's such a disaster for the prosecution. Then comes the cross-examination.
Buckle your seatbelt.
Yeah, because the family had been fundraising for the boy's cancer treatment. Well, it turns out they already had medical insurance. They scammed the local newspaper. There'd been a story in the local newspaper where they'd encouraged local people to donate money to help pay for his medical bills. They didn't need any of that money. And then when they didn't earn enough out of it, they went back to the newspaper, complained, and demanded a second story because they didn't think they'd made enough money. They had befriended George Lopez, the chat show host and comedian, and then accused him of trying to steal their money and asked him to repay them the money that they said he'd stolen. They had befriended another comedian, a female comedian, and told them that they needed her to donate like $10,000 or something, and then they didn't spend it on what they said they would. They had befriended Chris Tucker. They had started asking him to give them his car, which he didn't appreciate. They had telephoned Jay Leno and got through to Jay Leno on the phone, and the boy was talking to Leno, and Leno could hear the mother in the background prompting Gavin Alviso as to what to say. And he was so freaked out by the whole thing and thought it was a scam that he told his producers, don't ever put that kid through to me again. He came and testified to that. So, yeah, they had a history. They had been defrauding all of these people. And when they were friends with Chris Tucker, they'd sort of asked him to take them to the set of a Rush Hour movie.
Yeah.
And when they got there, they really were very poorly behaved. But anyway, all of this stuff about the conning money out of people, and also the mother had been committing welfare fraud. And on top of all that, I can't believe I nearly forgot to mention this, they had a history of falsely accusing people of sexual abuse. So the mother had gone into a JCPenney store and been accused of shoplifting, and the security guards had manhandled her. She decided to sue them, and then at some late stage in the proceedings suddenly decided to add a claim that they'd sexually assaulted her, and then had the two kids support her allegations and claimed that the two security guards, while they were removing her from the store, had started tweaking her nipples. Got a massive payout from JCPenney, and then didn't declare it to the government, and then went onto welfare and kept all the money. So this was a family with a history of dubious accusations and with a history of trying to con people out of money. And also the lawyer in the JCPenney case came to court and was granted permission by the judge to breach attorney-client privilege and testified that the sexual abuse accusations in the JCPenney case were not true, and that they had been threatened that if they did reveal that it was not true, that Janet Arvizo was friends with the Mexican mafia and she would have them killed.
This woman sounds like she came across as just completely crackers, and so therefore you definitely can't believe there's a looming shadow of doubt here. So is there anything else from the trial specifically that you think was an instrumental thing to discuss?
Well, I think the most important thing is that, as you've just said, after the family's testimony, there was a looming shadow of doubt. They had all been very poor witnesses, including the daughter, who we didn't even talk about, but they'd contradicted their own version of events. They contradicted each other's versions of events, and they had contradicted a lot of evidence as well. So what the prosecution did was to try to shore up their case. Out of sort of desperation, they called a bunch of witnesses called 1108 prior bad acts witnesses. So what the prosecution is essentially asking permission to do is to bring into court a bunch of witnesses whose testimony is insufficient to convict Michael Jackson of any other charge, but yet claim that their unreliable testimony is sufficient to shore up these allegations, which is frankly absurd. But actually, it ended up helping the defense, I think, because some of the people that they brought in were so outrageous, and it was just like mudslinging. They were calling all disgruntled ex-employees. There were some people called the Neverland Five who had been sacked from Neverland for stealing, and had all brought a class action suit for wrongful termination. They had lost and ended up owing Michael Jackson money. They had claimed on TV and in tabloids in 94 and 93 that they had witnessed inappropriate behavior, but then admitted in their depositions in the trial that they hadn't, and then had to come to court and claim that they had again, and they were discredited. It was just this parade of totally unreliable perjurers who either had perjured themselves in previous cases or were perjuring themselves in this case, seemingly because they were contradicting again their own versions of events, each other's versions of events, plus the evidence.
Snedden didn't seem to know what in the world he was doing in bringing these people in. And another thing that I thought was weird was that when Snedden claimed to somehow prove that Michael Jackson had abused Macaulay Culkin and all these people, and then when we got to the defense's case, the very first witness that they called to the stand was Wade Robson, I believe.
Yeah, so this parade of 1108 witnesses, they all come in and claim to have seen Michael Jackson molesting various boys, including Brett Barnes, Wade Robson, and Macaulay Culkin. So when the prosecution rests, Mesereau is in court at the end of the last day of the prosecution case. And after everybody's filed out, Tom Snedden comes over and says, so who are you going to call tomorrow? Who's your first witnesses going to be? And Mesereau says, Wade Robson, Brett Barnes, and Macaulay Culkin. And he said Snedden looked like somebody had punched him in the stomach. He just went completely white as a ghost and sort of collapsed over the jury rail. Like, what? He said he just looked like he could not believe what Mesereau just said. So of course, he calls in Wade Robson, Brett Barnes, Macaulay Culkin, first three witnesses in the defense case, who completely demolish the 1108 evidence and come in and say, I absolutely was never touched. I resent the implication. I'm furious that the prosecution have said that this happened. And they were incredibly strong witnesses, and it just made the prosecution look ridiculous. And during Wade Robson particularly, so the allegation, I believe, was that Wade Robson had been molested in a dance studio and had been molested in a jacuzzi or something. But Wade Robson is very strenuously denying all of these claims. And then the prosecutor who was cross-examining him was Ron Zonen. And sort of out of desperation, he goes, well, what if Michael Jackson molested you when you were asleep? Then you wouldn't know about it, would you? You know, your witnesses have never suggested that Wade Robson was molested in his sleep. You know, you're just clutching at straws now. I mean, you could say that to anyone.
One quick thing on Wade Robson. So he has since come out since Michael's death and claimed that from the time he was 7 to 16, he was raped, right? Like these are allegations above and beyond the worst that were even alleged in like the 2003 trial in 1993. If you're Michael Jackson and you've been raping a boy from the time he was 7 to 16 and you're in the trial of your life about child sex abuse, the very first person you're going to call to the stand when you know they're going to be asked, has Michael Jackson ever done X, Y, and Z to you, is this kid? that you've raped from the time he was 7 to 16, that does not make any sense. And he was asked very specific questions on the stand. He wasn't asked, were you molested? Because Wade's claiming, well, I didn't view it as molestation. I viewed it as... No, he wasn't asked, were you molested? He was asked, did this act happen to you? Did that act happen to you? So he was either lying then or he's lying now. And regardless, you can't believe anything this guy says. You know?
Exactly. I mean, he was asked specifically, did Michael Jackson touch your penis? Did Michael Jackson touch your button? So when you're saying, oh, well, I didn't realize it was abuse, well, that's not what you were asked.
Yeah.
And you perjured yourself. You've either perjured yourself then or you're lying now. It's one of the two.
It wasn't, did Michael Jackson abuse you by touching you here? It was, did Michael Jackson touch you here? No.
Yeah, exactly. And I spoke to the investigator in the case, Scott Ross, who was the defense investigator. And he said no witness takes the stand in that case unless I have interviewed them and I am confident that they're going to be good for us. And there were witnesses that I interviewed and I thought, this person's a bit kooky, we're not putting them on the stand, or this person's a bit flaky. He said with Robson, he interviewed him at length and he was absolutely confident, 100%, in putting this guy on the stand. He thought that he was going to be a fantastic, solid witness, and he totally does not believe the allegations that are being made now. Totally doesn't believe them. And he's actually friends with Wade Robson's brother, who's a private eye. And he said, you know, that he knows him through work, and he's told him, I don't believe anything your brother's saying. I just do not believe it.
But yeah, I mean, Wade Robson dedicated, I think, a whole chapter in his book to how the only reason he is what he is today is because of Michael Jackson in terms of his success.
Oh, for years after Michael Jackson died, he was totally team Michael Jackson. I mean, he appeared in Janet's tribute at the VMAs.
Right.
And he wrote a chapter in the Michael Jackson opus where he says something like, Michael Jackson is the most perfect human being I've ever met, and everything I aspire to be in life is based on what he was. He even, just literally weeks before he made his allegations, applied for the job choreographing the Cirque du Soleil tribute show and didn't get the job, and then started making the allegations.
Basically, now we've come to the end of all the important stuff in the trial, right? Defense witness, prosecution witnesses. So now the jury goes into deliberation.
Yeah, and the media was absolutely predicting convictions right up to immediately before the verdicts came in. And when the verdicts did come in, let's just say they didn't really. There was not much pause for reflection. It was just fury.
Yeah.
It was just absolute fury. And immediately the mudslinging began. He got off because he's rich. He got off because he's celebrity. I mean, even the prosecution parroted that line. It's quite ridiculous because the prosecution's case was Michael Jackson was on the verge of bankruptcy. He was massively in debt. Therefore, he orchestrated the Bashir interview, then he orchestrated the conspiracy to cover up the molestation because he was on the brink of financial ruin. And then Michael Jackson triumphs at trial, and they go, oh, well, it's only because he's so rich. You know, if you hang on a minute, this is like, what are you talking about? Is he on the brink of financial ruin, or is he massively wealthy? You can't have it both ways.
Exactly.
He was tried in, I believe it was in Santa Barbara, correct?
Yeah, he was tried in a small community in Santa Maria.
Santa Maria.
Is part of Santa Barbara County.
Yes, it is. Okay, so Santa Maria. This is a conservative part of California. I'm from California.
Absolutely.
Everyone on the jury was either white or Hispanic, I believe. There was one alternate juror who was black, but he did not decide any of the verdicts. And the thing that irritated me about the reaction, that was one of the happiest days of my life. And the reason that was one of the happiest days of my life is because I paid very close attention to the trial, and I believed very, very strongly that it was absolute bullshit. It could not be believed by a thinking person that Michael did what it was being alleged that he did. A thinking person could not believe that. And when they read the not guilty verdicts, I remember I was so happy. I watched it with my grandmother. She called me, and I drove over to the house because they'd reached the verdict, and we watched together, and we were so happy. And my grandma had a lot of fun making fun of Nancy Grace afterwards. But it was just so obvious. And I remember looking at all these people So at first I was angry at the media during the trial because I realized how dishonest they were. And then once the verdicts were reached, watching everyone in the media, all these talking heads, all these idiots respond to it, and they all looked, more than anything, they looked so incredibly foolish and stupid. All of them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it just demonstrates the sort of inanity of talking heads. You know, Tom Mesereau gave various interviews and he said he would watch the TV very, very infrequently during the trial because he was busy working on the defense. But when he did switch it on, he would be apoplectic sometimes because he would see people that had not been in the courtroom analyzing his performance as a lawyer. And of course, this trial was not televised.
Mhm.
So they really didn't know what they were talking about. They were analyzing his performance in the courtroom based on media reports, which in themselves were usually inaccurate, even if only by omission.
Yeah.
You know, he said that these people know nothing. These people don't know what they're talking about. These people are sat in TV studios. They're nowhere near the courthouse, and they're analyzing a trial that they're not even watching. And these are the people who are setting the agenda. These are the people who are determining the general public's opinion on guilt or innocence. In a case of this gravity, they don't know what they're talking about. And it was shocking. I mean, I remember being in the UK. There's a chat show that used to be on called Richard and Judy, and they would periodically have panels of British journalists sitting in the studio saying, what do you think of this week's developments in the trial? And you go, these people don't know anything. They weren't there.
Yeah.
You know, you can't analyse a trial based on what you've read in a newspaper.
Mhm.
Every day in that trial, there would have been 5-6 hours of testimony.
What they were doing, they were judging Michael Jackson and the mythology surrounding him and kids. That was the filter through which they took in what was happening at the trial, which made it impossible. They went in with so many presuppositions.
And that was what Linda Deutsch said as well. She said it was the worst trial she covered in a career spanning about 5 decades of court reporting. She said it was like being surrounded by idiots and bullies.
No, that's exactly what it was. It was idiots and bullies. The comments that they were making about him on TV, it was the most biased coverage collectively by everyone that I've ever seen. I mean, if there was nothing that no news, I mean, news stations are always, you know, there's the left, there's the right, everyone, at least in America, was propagating the idea that he had to have done it, that he had to have been guilty.
There is no way you would get me to convict Michael Jackson on any case that's been brought either to court or not to court, but any allegation that's been brought, because there has never been a victim who's come forward and said, Michael Jackson did this to me. They just went to the police, they didn't try to get money, and their story was consistent and credible. It's just never happened.
Right.
And you have to ask, if Michael Jackson was this serial predator of children, where is the credible victim? Where is the victim who comes forward and says, I'm not interested in suing, I'm not interested in talking to the media. All I want to do is talk to the police and go to court, get a conviction. Where is that victim? Where are their parents? They don't exist, it seems. They've never come forward. Even Wade Robson now has filed lawsuits against 50 different companies associated with Michael Jackson, seeking individual payouts from all of them. It's all about money. You know, to me, it's clear that Michael Jackson had an unhealthy obsession with children.
That's an opinion.
I was finna say, hold
necessarily
up.
an unhealthy sexual obsession with children, but an unhealthy obsession with children and childhood. And when he died in his bedroom, Hornby Hills, I think, was where he was living at the time, in North Carolwood Drive, even when he died, still recovering from the trauma of the 2005 trial, they found notes dotted all around his bedroom that said things like, children are sweet, children are innocent. And you're going, Michael, a child or a group of children and their parents just almost destroyed your life. You know, the reason you're having to do this comeback tour is because you're basically got no earning potential. The only way you can earn any money is through live performance, and your whole life has hit the skids, you know, and it's all because of kids. It's all because of his obsession with kids, and it's all because of kids that have been nefarious, you know, and he still was convinced children are sweet, children are innocent, and it's just clearly not rational. It's irrational behavior, you know?
Yeah, to make a blanket statement, some kids are sweet and some kids are innocent, and some kids are that way until their father gets them to concoct stories
Thank
after
you.
administering sodium amytal to them. So
Thank you for correcting
it's
him.
like,
It's like a pathological obsession. Like he's got this weird idea that childhood is the ultimate goal and children are brilliant and their lives are brilliant and I wish I was a child. In spite of the fact that his whole adult life he's just been fucked over by children. It was very frustrating to watch him emerge from the trauma of that trial and just think, is he going to learn? Is he going to learn? And Tom Mesereau told him, he said, Michael, you cannot ever do this again. You cannot ever hang around with children again, particularly not in California, because Tom Sneddon will come for you. Somebody will come for you.
you know, when the whole trial was going on, I thought to myself, probably the best person who has the best chance at beating these allegations is Michael Jackson. Just because, again, it's not like he tried to make any of this a secret. He was proud of it. It was like he literally said at one point when he was asked about sleeping in bed with kids, it's what the whole world should do.
But when you say bed, you're thinking sexual. They make that sexual. It's not sexual.
Exactly.
We're going to sleep. I tuck them in. I put a little music on, and do a little story time. I read a book. It's very sweet. Put the fireplace on. We give them hot milk. You know, we have little cookies. It's very charming. Very sweet.
Sure.
It's what the whole world should do.
That's exactly what he said. It's what the whole world should
Everyone
do.
should just go out and find kids and start having sleepovers. And he was sincere in that. And if you're a serial child sex abuser, first of all, you're not going to take a break for 10 years before you reoffend. And reoffend when the issue is white hot about the very kid you're going to start reoffending with. And second, you're not going to advertise it. 2003,
Exactly.
I'm beyond convinced that he was not guilty. Your take on 2003?
2003, the case was an absolute dud, and it should never have been brought to court, and the doubt was monumental. I mean, it's lunacy that case even came to court, and I have no problems in saying he was absolutely entitled to his not guilty verdicts on every single count in that case.
To me, 93 bothered me the most, but there's no evidence. With 1993, the number one thing that I feel like there's nothing there because there is nothing there. But I don't know what to make of 93. What do you make of 93?
93 is not the slam dunk not guilty that you got from the Arvizos, but it never got contested in a court. So all the stuff that we found out about the Arvizos in terms of the welfare fraud, the scamming of other people, etc., that all came out at trial. We don't know what we would have found out about the Chandlers had it gone to trial. But the doubt is monumental again for me. You have a kid who says he's not molested, then he says he is molested. Then when he says he is molested, he can't describe the genitals. Then they raid the ranch, they can't find anything that's incriminating. 2 grand juries can't form an indictment, even though they can indict a ham sandwich, as the old saying goes. You've got the dad on tape saying he has no idea if the allegations are true, and he's asked Michael for a lot of money. You know, there's no way you could convict.
What do you make of the fact that Jordy would not testify against Michael Jackson in 2003?
I mean, of course, you could say, well, he just must have not wanted the publicity and whatever, but you've got to keep in mind the fact that he did legally emancipate himself from the parents, that the witnesses were lined up to come to court and say, he told me it never happened, that he hated his parents.
Tom Sneddon, I think, is the most disgraceful character possibly in all of this. I mean, he clearly didn't know what he was doing.
Well, I believe that he believed that Michael was guilty. I don't believe that he was this guy who set out to destroy an innocent man. He should have investigated the Arvizos more thoroughly. It was stupid to bring that case based on the Arvizo story, I believe. But do I believe he believed Michael was guilty? Yes. That doesn't excuse his behavior. Some of his behavior was illegal. He should have been removed from office. And Michael, in my opinion, should have brought a wrongful, malicious prosecution case. But maybe he was better off just getting out of there and never having to see him or deal with him again. But, it was outrageous, the second case. Absolutely outrageous.
Last question I want to ask you. just being totally honest, your own personal feelings, to what degree, if any degree, like 0% chance to 100% chance that Michael had some type of sinister or sexual fixation with children?
No, I'm not convinced of that. I'm the kind of person that if you're going to tell me that, you need to give me some evidence. And if I look at each allegation that was made on its own merits, each one falls down. Each one is undermined by lies and contradictions and ulterior motives. I don't think you can take the allegations that were made about him as being indicative of there being any particular threat, because they all fell down. And if they don't stand up on their own, then you can't take them as a collective either. You could make a circumstantial case, right? You could go, well, he hangs around with kids, he admits sharing his bed with kids, there's been allegations, right? But when you get into the nitty-gritty, when you get, the devil is in the detail.
Yeah.
And when you get into the detail, there just is nothing. There's nothing. Everything can be mitigated.
The one thing he was guilty of was really, really bad judgment.
He made a very poor judgment to indulge that obsession after 93. You can kind of excuse it before 93 as living in a bubble, but after 93 it was reckless and dangerous and crazy.
Opinion.
And indefensible, really.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. Michael Jackson was someone who, you talk about people who captivate a generation or a society. He literally captivated the world and still does. And part of the saddest part of his life was these allegations. I mean, the thing he loved most, very sincerely, is kind of the thing that took him out.
I'm gonna talk over this
And
for the
it's
music.
too bad.
Okay.
It's always be a
I
really
was
tragic.
like,
Never should have happened.
I love you.
I love you too, Mike. That's crazy.
Heal the world. Woo. I love you.
I love you too.
I love you.
I love you more.
Olive juice.
Is that from Girlfriends?
What? Wait, who?
You go dancing.
Hey. Okay. Beautiful song.
You can mute it.
I'm gonna pause it here, y'all, because I'm not trying to get this.
Okay. She said, I ain't trying to get got.
Oh, you made it to the end.
I made it so far.
I ain't trying to get got.
I think this is it. I made it so far. The other side.
Wow.
Here,
Wow.
Who said olive juice?
Me.
I heard that on Girlfriends.
Oh wow. Jeez, how do you guys feel now?
It's heavy. It's always heavy to take this in, but I'm very happy we got to share with the guests and people on the chat. I love the conversation and interaction.
Better informed, I learned a lot.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
And I think those two guys covered it so well and broke it apart so well and so clearly and so easily to understand. It's like I already knew all these things that they were talking about. I already saw this perspective, but to hear them like actually break it up like that, it's just like that much more validating.
Yeah. It was very helpful and so many nuggets in there.
Yeah, for sure.
There were some things that I had completely forgot about. Like I had, maybe researched it years prior or whatever. I forgot about, and it was kind of like a refresher. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you can handle it, because I know it's rough, try and come back every now and then, maybe rewatch stuff like this or read articles and stuff. Just keep yourself refreshed on like the information and stuff.
You
And
know what?
despite it's heavy, I feel like watching this, like I said, it's validating. So like it is heavy, but I do feel better. Not that I had any doubts, but like it does feel good to have this all broken apart like that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. So what was like the one piece that like blew your mind from this whole thing?
For
Ooh.
me, mine's is the every 10 years pattern, and also he didn't call me pattern, or I didn't get, I didn't get invited pattern. That's the pattern I see. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The horrible evidence that the Gavins were scammers, including with insurance, including with celebrities, including with lawsuits and not filing taxes properly. Scammers, and they still sided with Michael.
Yeah.
I mean, they still sided with the Gavins instead of Michael Jackson. It was like,
Yeah.
wait, they're showing you a pattern
Exactly.
of fraudulent behavior with other celebrities, and you're still like, nope, Michael did it.
Yep.
I think the one it was probably like kind of seemed smaller, like the ones for me was the first of all in the beginning where Evan Chandler is talking to the guy and he's like, well, do you think he's like, messing with them? And that's where you see that seed planted of the lie. That's where the lie like originated from. And so I think, like I was saying before, like when you look at that tiny little seed, take that away, it like unravels everything. It discredits everything. And then also just like the part where they were like, oh, he kept us hostage. We couldn't even look at the clocks and stuff. He was like, well, ain't there a big old clock out there?
That part.
Neverland at the train station,
Can we all agree that Mesro is the GOAT? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I like it. I love the part where he's like letting her talk. I like the part that he goes, you're not supposed to say why. It always has to be, open-ended or whatever. And he goes, so why did you, And he goes, why? Because Michael didn't call me. I was like, that was beautiful.
That was smooth. He knew how to play, how to like get that in place to trap him.
Can we get some goat emojis in the chat, y'all? Because apparently we have rats, goats, and snakes up in these stories. So some goats up.
We have the Neverland farm up in here.
I'm done. Look at Matt in the backstage with the goat.
We just need Louis the Llama. Louis the Llama has to show up. Okay,
so funny.
The part that they didn't talk about in here, and I don't know if it's like super duper known, but apparently the mom, the Refusal family, her name is Janet. And apparently she married a man with the last name Jackson. So she looking a little bit obsessed because now her name is Janet Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, okay.
Why would you do that?
And they played Michael at Gavin's wedding.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah,
and he laughed.
There's a video on it. There's a video somewhere. I think I saw it.
He didn't seem traumatized. Nothing. Yeah. He giggled.
It was very demonic. I don't know. It's just something dark about that. Like, so I don't know.
Hey, that's true though. I'm sorry, I gotta side with you on that. Evil.
And that just shows, like, if he was truly that traumatized, why would he be playing that at his wedding? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
A lot of things like that make it easy to debunk the BS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, when something's legitly traumatizing, whether it's abuse from childhood or things that happened to you as you got older, you're going to disassociate it in every way possible. You're not going to be like, oh, I know people that have color triggers, scent triggers, and I love how they brought up one of the current accusers, and they were like, this is BS.
Yep. Jeez. Crazy. Oh my God. We've seen all these footages. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
You can go ahead.
Oh no, that's it. That's all I have.
Like his testimony was the most, like, one of the most convincing, right? So it's like, dude, like, you have one of the most convincing testimonies that, like, helped solidify the jury's decision, and now you want to come out the woodwork looking for checks? Boy, go flip some burgers. Please.
Well, he's not the chicken dancer for a reason. Let me put chicken in the emoji. Hold on.
There you go.
If anybody's like fortunate enough to be around wealthy people, it's not for you to like feel entitled or it has to stay that way. Like it's unfortunately, I'm sure Michael has had more people that did not do this to him, but it only took 2 to really taint his legacy.
Yeah.
Or it's sad because thousands and thousands and thousands of children have came to the house, whether it was for a special day, or whatever was going on, 0 problems. And it's always the one that he opens the heart to and let them stay a little bit longer. They'd be like, now I don't have access to it anymore, and all of a sudden you have a problem.
Yeah, it's almost like these kids and those families of those kids are, like, trying to, like, get their way into that to, like, set themselves up to get that kind of support from Michael, and then just turn on him, you know?
When they don't get their way.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and that's another common, like, pattern I saw too, is like every single time someone didn't get their way or something that they wanted, like, then they would put out another allegation. Like, it's like they would just counter everything that they didn't like with an allegation. And it's like, after a few times, you can pick up on that.
Yeah, those were the 2 major ones, big ones. But then I think if you read in one of the bodyguards books that they mention that this is a common occurrence whenever they don't get their way. It's like besides these guys that we know, there's other people that used to say, oh yeah, I knew him. Then something happens and then they say, you know what, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write an article. It's, yeah, it was nonstop.
I'm trying to look for when she changed her. She married somebody named Jackson.
I think he was like let me see.
This was after the trial, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I want to say his name was Jay Jackson or something like that. Was that his name?
But because somebody had asked in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, it was. Oh, here we are. It's actually on the trial audio transcript. It says Michael Jackson 2005 trial day 30 part 1. Jay Jackson and Janet Arvizo. So she married a guy named Jay Jackson.
Wow.
Ew.
Weirdo.
I'm sorry, let me stop.
No, you're good. But I don't even know. They're just disgusting, to say the least. They're disgusting.
This was hard to watch, but
it was.
But it was informative. I trust me. I think this was a good idea. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm just happy that we got to share on the screen with everybody. We didn't think that would work. So let's see tomorrow. Tomorrow we have which one is the one for tomorrow? Gee, I don't even know my own schedule, y'all.
L in the aftermath?
I believe so.
I think I'm gonna be at work. I'm so sad because that one is so good.
I know, I'm gonna be at work too.
Leaving Neverland, the aftermath, the TLC theater version.
That's the one. Like that's what I watched. Like I haven't seen the actual mockumentary, but they take clips from that mockumentary and they'll like they'll show a clip and then they'll debunk it with another clip. Like sometimes they debunk themselves. Like they'll say something in the past, like, oh yeah, this, it was like this, and then they were in like the mockumentary saying like, oh, actually it happened this way. So they'll pull up that clip from the past and they're like, well, back here you said it was this.
Yeah.
And I think the guy who's making Tribal Media, he's the one who did this one.
I believe so, yes. So come back tomorrow, guys. We have a round 2. Tori should call out. Ray should call out.
Oh,
Don't
don't tempt me. Do not tempt me, because I will.
Maybe I'll do some homework tonight, watch it tonight, and try to hop in tomorrow when I can.
That works. That works.
Yeah, we'll be here. But I hope you guys enjoyed this kinda in a way, just to be together and explore, and that you guys actually got some nuggets out of this, so we can
absolutely
fight the good fight, be the
I think
soldiers
there's
of
another
love.
question in chat, actually. Sorry, but
Go ahead.
Paige just asked, why was Dee Dee and the prosecutor at Gavin's wedding? Yeah, that one. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anyone else knows.
You mean a Diane Diamond? Is
Yes.
that what
Yeah.
Yes.
Ew.
No, Dirty Diana.
Oh.
Right.
Literally though.
Because they're friends. They're friends.
Oh wow.
So
Which just adds a whole other layer onto it.
exactly. That should speak a lot.
Uh-huh.
Oh, let me put the this playlist in the chat. This page is called, or this channel, sorry, it's called MJ. Oh, I can't put. I gotta put it in the on my phone. It's called MJ Trial. They even have the. We'll just say the trial with the 2009 situation.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me see.
They even have those transcripts on there. But
Jen, I have the slide for tomorrow's wife. If you see it.
Do I just add it?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Let me take the comment off. There we go.
So,
Thank you, Trish, the queen of
so
life.
so that's for Saturday, and then of course this will be continue all the way to Sunday. The Danny Wu one on my channel, we can't share it because that's a paid documentary, but I think I might take the risk for the other ones because I do like it better with us seeing it together.
Okay.
Wherever we can see stuff together like this, we'll go for it because it was easier to stop commentary, That's tomorrow. For those who can make it, if you can't make it, just watch the replay. Because hopefully we'll be able to show this one like we did today.
Yes, hopefully. And if this goes well, we'll do like a lot more. There's a lot more plans behind the scenes for a lot more events like this. So thank you guys for joining and your commentary. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Yeah. This is an awesome idea.
Thank you guys for joining. I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God, am I going to do this? Should I do this? But you guys
I'm
have
glad
been
you did it.
amazing.
This was great.
Thank you.
Worked out perfect.
Yeah, this is a good way to start it off too. I think this was a really good one to get into it. So
Thank you guys.
Girls.
But, so with that, fight with love. Don't click on clickbait. Stay informed, stay educated, and join us tomorrow.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.